very warm welcome to everyone and welcome to the Education Conference 2022.
My name is Laura.
And my name is Gavin, and we will be your MCs for today.
For this year's Education Conference, we have over 160 people attending. That is the people of you here in the room. Very warm welcome. So glad you could come out. And a very warm welcome, of course, as well to everyone joining us online.
Hi. For all the online participants, just note if you do experience any technical difficulty, please click on the help button below and somebody will provide you with some technical assistance. For the SIM staff joining us online, please remember to fill out your information in order to receive your lunch voucher. You can do so at the Validate lunch voucher room that you should be seeing on your screen.
All right. Now, before we start, we want to invite everyone to
take a selfie.
Scan the QR code on the screen. I promise it went great in the rehearsal. Yes. So I invite everyone to scan the QR code on the screen so you can take your selfie and add it to the photo booth, add it to the photo gallery on the online platform. At the end, we will collect all the pictures there and make a collage to send it to you. So you can have like a group picture, if you will, of everyone that includes everyone that was online. So have you taken your selfie yet?
No. I'm camera shy.
Oh, but you have to. Hold on.
I will.
Hold on.
Okay, I'm just waiting for you. We should take a selfie with the audience, innit?
We should, yes.
All right, I can see some of you are taking very nice selfies. If you can include as many participants as you can, that will be encouraged. All right, just like us.
Here we go.
Smile. All right. Thank you very much. All right. It's been great seeing everyone contributing to the discussion board, polls, and competing in the quizzes online. In the days leading up to this event, we could tell that everyone was very excited for today.
Absolutely. All right, so here is our program for today. First, we will kick off with a welcome and opening speech by our PCEO, Mr. Siat Chin Siong. And we will follow up with an opening speech by our Vice Provost, Mr. Timothy Chan. Then we will do a group photo of everyone here in the room, which is why we're going to ask you to move forward. Then after, we will start with our keynote, how higher ed faculty can embrace digital transformation in their teaching role by Professor Belinda Tynan. Then we'll take a short break, and when we come back from break, we will enjoy a panel discussion with our resident academic directors from the various university partners, University of London, University at Buffalo, RMIT, and SAM, and our keynote speaker, Professor Tynan, will join in as well. And we will end with lunch and networking. And for our second keynote speech, May the 4th be with you, by Professor Jilly Salmon, we will have some more details for you on that later.
Right, and as a special addition for this event, we have our very own Mr. Tam. He'll be joining us today to create a vision and share a visual impression of the session with us. I would now like to invite our President and Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Siat Chin Siong, to give his welcome speech. Mr. Siat, please.
Yeah, I think so.
A very good morning to one and all, and a very, very warm welcome to the SMGE Education Conference 2022. I can't really remember when was the last time we did this in a physical format, in a physical location. Must have been 3 years ago, I think. It's really good to see all of you here this morning. Let me also extend a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Professor Belinda Tynan, and to our resident director, Dr. Kelvin McKelvey with the University at Buffalo, and Professor Mark King, Academic Director with RMIT Singapore. Our theme today is, not surprisingly, pedagogical transformation in an age of digital learning. And this theme is very much in line with the direction SIM is taking. Coming out of the pandemic, we had focused very much on transformation, innovation, and providing flexible learning pathways. I suppose you could say that the single biggest driver of digitalization was the pandemic, ironically. Also, we aim to expand our international student population. Today, almost international students make up almost 30% of our student population. We are also expanding our corporate and professional development courses. And we are also preparing to transform some of our undergraduate programs to be taught fully online, offering students around the world the opportunity to attend class and complete a degree, even though they cannot be with us here physically in the campus. So I'd now like to give a bit of more context on the theme of this conference. And I'd like to refer to a recent publication on a competency framework for teaching and learning innovation centers. And one of the highlights was this: the key factors for success. 1, student support. 2, technology. 3, evidence-based practices. 4, leadership, culture, and transformation. And finally, faculty learning and support. On student support and technology, and some of you may already know, SIM is enhancing student support by continuing to increase the quality of learning and to offer a learner-centric experience to our students. We offer hybrid sessions. For example, students who are unable to attend in-person lessons, there are now options for them to experience the same by tuning in synchronously. To ensure a seamless learning experience, we even set up our classroom at B507 that has been equipped with the next generation classroom infrastructure, such as multiple screens, roving cameras, i.e. the cameras actually follow you. They don't kind of rove around the room, and ceiling microphones. The whole idea really is to create a seamless experience with the lecturer, even though you're not there physically. And the whole idea also is to minimize the lecturer having to play with the technology, but to conduct his lessons in the most natural way. And so therefore, when implementing technology-enhanced learning or digital education, we actually consider several pedagogical models for implementation, and these include both online and blended learning. In addition to hybrid, blended, and online education formats, we also plan to incorporate the applied learning approach as the secondary pedagogy. Applied learning is about facilitating the transfer of learning into authentic and real-world scenarios. As lecturers, you can help the students see the validity and application of the curriculum in the employment context. And many good practices within SIM have already been implemented and adapted across varying subjects by yourselves. I encourage you to build upon this foundation and develop these good practices further. To continuously improve our curriculum and teaching practices, it is important to anchor the learning and teaching function on evidence-based practices. We can do this by systematizing the identification and dissemination of best practices. The process of collecting ideas, data, and feedback promotes greater exchange of information and practices throughout SIM. This allows lecturers to collaborate as a community to further refine their teaching craft. In our journey towards Horizon 2025, leadership, culture, and transformation are critical, particularly in the current educational landscape in Singapore. Many of you who have read in the papers, the country is really getting all into lifelong learning, and the education landscape will change in terms of how our students go about learning lifelong skills. The GE Cluster leadership team is working closely with professional and development teams to chart the path for the next 3 to 5 years. Areas of growth that we will be focusing on include how we can take our programs to new markets and developing new intellectual property while making sure that our processes and capabilities are enhanced and aligned with our purpose. Many of you participated in the SIM rebranding, the logo up there, top right. The new brand reflects our refreshed mission to future-ready the workforce and to deliver positive impacts to learners. It goes without saying, and I think this has been said many times, learning is no longer about front-loading education. Learning is now lifelong. So this rebranding exercise is a testament of our commitment to inspiring learners to thrive in life through lifelong learning. And some of the initiatives that have come out from that include our Learner Advisory Center. We've set up the Center for Micro-Credentials and the Center for Systems Leadership, which is to equip and guide our learners on their path to success, equipping them with industry-relevant knowledge and skills. SIM's SG United Skills programs have facilitated also mid-career learners to get job placements, while new partnerships with companies such as M1 and NCS, Singtel, ensure that they are able to grow and retain their talent with SIM's both professional as well as academic programs. We hope to prepare learners for the future by equipping them with lifelong skills, to be agile and resilient so that they can advance in their professional careers and deliver positive outcomes for the organizations they work in and throughout the wider community. SIM will do this with its wide range of programs offered through its core business entities, SIM Academy and SIM Global Education. And lastly, faculty learning and support. To close the gap towards Horizon 2025, we want to partner with you, our faculty, to identify the best practices with high impact through a model of professional development for lecturers to support you in delivering the best learning experience and outcomes to our students. The academic division and academic development team will be reaching out to you to seek your inputs and inviting you to share with the community for continuous improvement of our programs and courses. Now, before I hand over to Vice Provost Dr. Timothy Chan, I want to add my personal appreciation and gratitude for all your contribution, commitment to continuous learning by spending this Saturday morning with us. Our journey at SIM is far from over. We hope to play a very purposeful role in Singapore and the region, helping learners, individuals, and organizations thrive across life stages. Therefore, as we move through an ever-changing world, the need to innovate and reinvent ourselves is necessary so that we can rise to meet the challenges ahead. Your dedication as our lecturers, as our faculty, to SIM, to our students, is both indispensable and irreplaceable. And I want to thank you for that. Thank you again for attending this session today, and I hope you will enjoy today's program very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PCO, for your words of support and encouragement. We understand you have a very busy schedule and are very honored and grateful for you to take the time to join us today. Please, let's give him another round of applause.
All right, so to expand a little bit on what PCO mentioned about the community and professional development, we need your input. So please let us know what you would like to see in the training. Is there anything that you would like to learn more about? Is there anything that you would like to delve deeper into? And secondly, share your own knowledge that you already have. Maybe you have done a Quality Matters course. Maybe you have some other experience with learning strategies that are very useful, but that are great to share with your lecturers, with your colleagues. So please, if you think of anything that you would like to share with your colleagues, or if there's anything that you would like to delve deeper into, please let us know. You can contact us at lecturerdevelopment@sim.edu.sg, or you can reach out to us in person. That would be either myself, Mei Lin, at the front here, if you would wave, or Fui Chin, right here, to your right, wave. You can contact either of us or send us an email and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move on, we would like to take a group photo, all right? So if I could get everyone to move forward, so those in the back row, I would encourage you to come forward so that we can capture you all in one amazing shot.
Yes.
Yes, if you could come down, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody's face is welcomed in the photo, and everybody's smile is appreciated.
Yes, please smile.
Well, thank you very much for those wonderful poses and beautiful smiles. All right. We would now like to invite our Vice Provost, Dr. Timothy Chan, on stage to give his welcome speech.
And here he is.
And here he is. Over to you, Dr. Chan.
Good morning, our guests. Good morning, our keynote speaker, Professor Belinda Thailand, University of Buffalo Resident Director, Dr. Kelvin McCurvey, our MIT Academic Director, Professor Mark King, SIM faculty, associates, and colleagues. Welcome. And also a special welcome to our partners and educators from Singapore and overseas who are joining us online.
Yeah.
This is the 11th education conference we organize for SIM academic staff and associate lecturer. The 10th installment was held virtually due to the pandemic. So I'm really glad that we get to meet on campus this morning to learn as a community for this year's conference and to offer the virtual option for colleagues and educators in the region who cannot join us physically. Our President has elaborated the overall institutional direction as aligned with the conference theme this year: pedagogical transformation in an age of digital learning. I was in another conference a few days ago. The conference looked at the future of higher education. In the course of my dialogue with our peers, many of us acknowledge that for the early stage, when pandemic started, although we have switched everything online, but we are actually doing emergency remote education. For the last 2 years, we learned a lot in terms of the education technology, in terms of the pedagogy. I know here at SIM, for academic training, our colleague has adopted the TPAC framework, that is, to offer training in the area of content knowledge, in the area of technological knowledge, and also in the area of pedagogical knowledge. But in the conference I attended a few days ago, many of us acknowledge that we do need to have some pedagogy of care to our students. It is, in fact, very challenging for students who have to study alone at home. They may feel isolated, they may feel stressed, and other barriers in the learning. 2022 has been a good year for us because we achieved several accolades and milestones. We have been awarded the EduTrust certification by CPE since May 2010. And this year, we have renewed another 4 years of EduTrust certification. The certification recognizes private education institutions that have put in place robust academic systems and processes and have attained a quality standard in the delivery of education. Again, in August this year, SIMGE has also attained the EduTrust Star Award. The Star Award is given to PEI for attaining a commendable level of performance in managing their institutions and providing an outstanding quality of education and welfare for their students. This mark is a symbol of recognition for outstanding achievement. In fact, in the whole of Singapore, now we have only 3 private education institutions who are awarded this Star Award. We would not have been able to achieve the star status without your excellent teaching and unwavering support to our students. With this, thank you very much. In an appreciation to your partnership with SIMGE in this EduTrust journey, we're giving away a fresh card, a fresh pay cash card to all eligible associate lecturers. And I believe that you have collected yours at the registration counter on your way in for those who attended this event physically. This is to commemorate the achievement we have, the Star Award. But do take note that we have preloaded $50 in the card. So do use it for your journey and whenever F&B and other institutions that allow the use of the fresh card. So don't just keep it in a drawer. Do spend the money first, okay? After 2 years of virtual classroom experience due to pandemic, we have taken the learning from online delivery to launch our first series of fully online program. We have launched 2 graduate diploma in business management and data science, along with 5 other graduate certificates in analytics, digital marketing, cybersecurity management, information technology management, and human resource management. As SIM looks to expand its online presence to upskill and reskill professionals for the future of work, we are partnering Key Path Education, an online program management provider based in Melbourne, Australia, to expand our reach to offer these in-demand programs beyond Singapore. In being able to offer these online programs with SIMGE, students across the region will have greater flexibility to expand the knowledge and skill sets at the convenience of their schedules without having to commute to campus for classes. And the first cohort has since started in July and showing promising enrollment. Given the changing landscape of higher education, we hope to continuously strengthen CMGE's capability for flexible learning approaches, digital resources, and online assessment management. In the coming year, the academic division is formalizing a framework of content development processes, including different approaches to pedagogy as well as educational tools to support teaching and learning. We will continue to explore whether online program can be offered in a modular and or staggered approach, including duration and intensity of programs to be more flexible to complement students' career and or lifestyle demand. And I just received an update from MOE just a couple of days ago. We've been inquiring whether we can provide short courses. Just now, President mentioned, through the Center for Micro-Credential, we've been offering short courses, skill-based, with assessment on demand basis. We call them micro-credential. We've been asking the ministry whether we can stack this micro-credential to a module, from a module to certificate or to academic qualification. We have this dialogue with CPE for over a year now. Lately, we know that it is a higher education policy issue, so we refer to MOE. And the last few days, we get some feedback. There is some progress. At the moment, I may not be able to announce the details of it, but there is something positive going on. The ministry seems to acknowledge that micro-credential is a way to upskill and provide needed skills to particularly people who are in the workforce. So we'll continue the dialogue with our ministry and see how we can innovate our training and to benefit a bigger pool of people, particular learners, particularly those who are in the workforce. Okay. Let me continue with that. Most of you have benefited from the professional learning event facilitated by the academic development team, such as the crash course in blended learning, hybrid teaching, as well as the self-paced courses offered in Canvas on academic integrity and those offered through Quality Matters on effective blended learning and online teaching. Based on this foundation, we hope to work with you to explore ways to systematically integrate this evidence-informed instructional strategy to further enhance student learning engagement. You can also look forward to more on-demand resources to support you in your classroom practices, be it in person, online, or hybrid. One of which is the podcast series launched in September 2022 called SIM Teaching Matters. This is a platform where you can hear from your peers, fellow associate lecturer with rich experience teaching SIM students, teaching award recipients, as well as others who have experimented with new EdTech tools or innovative way of teaching. Some of the professional learning opportunity includes recognition pathway that allow you to earn micro-credentials upon completion. And do look out for upcoming programs in 2023 and register your interest in the event list inside your conference goodie bag. As part of Horizon 2025 initiative, we are also stepping up the effort to increase international student enrollment through partnership and collaborations with regional partners. So you can expect more international students in our midst from this year on. The demographic shift in our student population also means the expectation for culturally responsive teaching. We need to pay more attention to diversity and inclusion strategies. More resources and training opportunity in this aspect will be provided next year. A secondary pedagogy that we'll be focusing on is applied learning. I think our president have briefly mentioned that. To close the college to career gap, it is critical to ensure that students experience how the theory may be applied in the actual world. You can look forward to possibility to explore integration of applied learning approaches into your teaching too in the coming month. As part of our ongoing process optimization and SIM digitalization journey, there's another initiative we are undergoing. That is, we are moving the lecturer management function out of SIM Connect to cloud-based human capital management system. The cloud solution will go live in Q2 next year to provide you a better experience for all your contractual engagement matters, such as applying to teach more modules, updating your personal particulars, applying for sick leave, and class rescheduling requests. You will be notified for user familiarization sections in due time. I would also like to introduce to you the centralized web space to serve as a one-stop go-to page for all matters relating to campus administration queries, as well as teaching and learning support. This page includes both public as well as secure area for you to access. You'll be able to find from here the on-demand resources such as the podcast episodes, various documents such as CAPA application, lecturer handbooks, etc. Because this site is still under development, some of the links may still not alive. You can expect the full suite to be up early next year, and this also means that we welcome your suggestion on the information that you would like to have so that we can include it. Later after my speech, Laura will navigate to the site to give you a sneak peek. Before I conclude, and before we welcome Professor Belinda Thailand with the conference keynote, I wish to acknowledge the academic development team, along with volunteers from other departments for putting in the hard work to organize this event. This conference, together with the various professional learning opportunities offered to you in the past, is really our investment in you, because we believe you, our associates, are an important asset to help students learn for life, strive for life. I wish you a fruitful morning learning from the keynotes, panel discussion, and with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. So can we have the website on the screen?
There you go.
Wow, that looks good, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? All right, so this is the web page that is specifically targeted at the lecturers. So we have a word of welcome from our provost. We have a link here directly to the news and events page for lecturers, which has sharing of articles, but also the upcoming trainings and workshops. You may recognize your own face on there. And this is the content that we are offering and will offer. So this will be greatly expanded throughout next year. There we go. So there will be resources on here. There will be, there you see the link to the podcast. We have some contact information as well if you have any questions. And all the way at the bottom, we have a link to the academics portal. This will be a sectioned off area on the website where you log in and where you get the more confidential information. So there will be the link to the workday, the lecturer handbook, applying for parking, those kinds of things. And then, as I just mentioned, the link to the podcast is also on the website, so that's the direct link. So far we have 5 episodes, so please give it a listen. If you want to join for an episode, feel very free, please contact me. And actually, our keynote speaker, Professor Tynan, has been kind enough to agree to lend her voice and her insights as well for the next episode, so that will be upcoming as well.
All right, thank you very much. The next keynote speak is by Professor Belinda Tynan. Yes,
so we will have opportunity for Q&A afterwards. For everyone online, please use the Q&A feature to write down all your questions so we can read them out for you and get them answered. And for everyone in the room, please think of as many questions as you have. This is your time to ask them, or after the keynote speech is the time to ask them. We will have 2 people with microphones that can go down the room so you can ask your questions.
Now let's please welcome Professor Belinda Tynan to deliver her keynote speech entitled How Higher Education Faculty Can Embrace Digital Transformation in Their Teaching Role. So Professor Tynan was the former provost of the Australian Catholic University and has over 24 years of executive leadership experience in higher education and vocational education. She also has deep expertise in digital and educational technology solutions.
She is also a winner of the Australian Financial Review Top 100 Women of Influence in the Board and Management category. In 2019 and 2020, Telstra Businesswoman of the Year and Victorian winner in the Academia and Professional category. She will share her insights on how the world as well as the view on education and campuses have changed and what challenges and opportunities lie ahead.
That's me.
Thank you.
Professor Tynan, please.
Thank you so much. It's always embarrassing to hear your CV kind of read out in front of you, but it also reminds you of the journey that you've taken and how old you've become, actually. So thank you for that. Now, before we start, I'd like to welcome the people that are online. I'm sure you're all still in your pyjamas, because here you all are on a Saturday morning in here, totally committed. All those people are in front of me, plus all of those of you who are online. Thinking and considering learning and teaching and your pedagogical approaches to how you're going to support the learners that come to SIM. I think that's pretty good dedication, actually. So I'd like to thank you. Thank you for coming this morning and being here. And I hope that what I present today will be useful to you and kickstart some ideas. But for those of you who are at home online, you're not off the hook, because I've got a few things that I'd like you to do as well as we travel through today. So just probably a little bit more about me as an educator. There's the CV, and we all have a CV, but we all come from somewhere. And I guess I've probably always had a passion for education. And from the very youngest age, I was teaching my family, my siblings, and my cousins. In Australia, it's quite a big country compared to here. And where my parents lived and my grandparents lived was a long way apart from each other. So as children, we used to take these very long train rides from Sydney through to a place called Broken Hill. And Broken Hill, if some of you know, might be where BHP comes from, BHP Billiton. You may know that big company. But that was a 13-hour train ride that we used to do as children. We'd start in Sydney and we'd go all the way to Broken Hill to see our grandparents. Now, on those train rides, I don't know what possessed me really, but I used to develop teaching packs. I'd create puzzles, activities, games for all of my cousins and my brothers and sisters. So whether they liked it or not, I was kind of teaching them in a way from a very long age. And I think I've carried that with me my entire life. From when I've studied as a junior, as a student and my education, and I'm definitely a lifelong learner. And I know many of you are here too, and I've collected qualifications through my entire life. I have a level of curiosity that I think is innate to me, and I think is really important when you're working in education. And I've also travelled with my qualifications with education. So I've managed to work in countries like this country, like in Singapore. So I spent some time teaching and living and working in Singapore as well. And I have to say that would have been a real highlight in my career to date. I loved being here. And whenever you get off the plane and you come into Singapore airport, you just know that the world is going to be okay. It all works so smoothly, even with the new digital forms coming in, and then all the flowers and how neat and tidy and clean everything is. I love Singapore for that. But more than that, what I really love about Singapore is its people. And I know that the time I spent here, I felt very embraced and very welcomed and very part of the community, even though it was only for a short time. In my role as Deputy Vice-Chancellor at RMIT, I also had the privilege to preside over several of your graduations and to shake many students' hands in the days when we could sort of shake hands and be closer to each other. So I do have a knowledge of how Singapore Institute of Management works and a very intimate knowledge of how RMIT operates here as well. But I'd have to say, living and working in other countries is a highlight of anybody's self and who you are, because you learn a lot about who you are by understanding other cultures and nations. So it is a pleasure to be with you here today and to share perhaps part of my passion about education, because I think it's been a deep part of me and my purpose, and that education has the possibility to transform people, transform societies and transform the world. And when you look at what's happening in our world at the moment, we certainly need educated people to contribute to that. So before we get started, what I'd like to do is get you to do a little activity for me. I can't help myself. I'm a teacher at heart. You're all sitting next to someone. Maybe you know who that person is. That's fantastic. And if you do, you don't need to introduce yourself. But for those people who are in the room, either introduce yourself and just say, what would you like to get out of today? I mean, after all, you've given up your Saturday morning. And if I was at home, and I live on a farm in Victoria, I'd be probably up to my second or my third coffee. I'd be having some toast. I'd be reading the newspapers, or I might have gone out to breakfast with some friends. I wouldn't be here listening to this like you are. So have a chat to the person next to you and find out, why are you here today? What are you hoping to take away from today? And for those people who are online, don't think you're off the hook, because you're not. What I'd like you to do is get into the chat box, introduce yourself. Don't tell anyone what you're still wearing your PJs, but definitely do tell people online what it is that you'd like to hear today, or why you're sort of online and watching. And that would be fantastic. And I will get Laura and her team to kind of give me that feedback as we go. So take a few moments to do that, and then we'll really get started. Thank you. So chat amongst yourselves for a moment.
Perfect, even better time. Did you want a handheld one? Did you want a handheld one? I think it's fine.
So Laura and Gavin, I hope you're checking out all those online responses. I might have
Yes,
to.
we are.
I hope
So-
I hope no one's giving you any images of their pajamas.
Not yet. Not yet. Yes, for those logging on online, I do encourage you to post in the chat what you wish to get out of today's session. All right? So, please participate.
And anyone in the audience who's not sitting next to someone, maybe you could just turn around and talk to the person behind you. And I've got one lonely man right in the middle. Maybe you could move along and sit near your colleague. Now, I do believe I've got some people with microphones down there who are going to come to you shortly. Thank you. Okay, let's see what people are saying. It's really nice to see. I've got people waving at each other, talking to each other. There are even smiles in the room. So look, I've got some microphones. Could my two people with the microphones stand up? They're just going to come up to the audience to your row, and maybe I could get some of you to say who you are, introduce yourself, please, and tell me why you've come here this morning. Right, I'm going to go to the first row here. So if I could have some people in that first row, please. You might need to take your mask off to introduce yourself. I can see there's some good delegation happening here. So, what's your name and what are you doing here today?
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm here to attend the conference.
Oh, could you hold that a little closer to your mouth? so we can
I'm
hear you?
of course here to attend the conference. Okay, what I hope to get out of today is to get some ideas, more ideas, and maybe some tricks, okay, to engage the student more. Okay, maybe using more activities that we have mentioned. Okay, I'm running out of ideas of activities to engage the student online.
Okay, well, that's a very practical thing. You want some tips for what else you can do in the online environment.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Why don't you hand the microphone behind you, and we'll get something from the next row going up. And then I'm going to grab something from the online environment.
Okay, my name is Wiggy. What do I teach? It's a very simple question. Actually, I teach simple things to difficult people. Okay, what do I want to get out of this conference? I just want to get some insights. Looking down the road into the future, you know, this metaverse and this kind of thing. So what is coming up? So we are not static, okay? Well, I mean, we all know all this, what's going on right now. But what's right in front, let's say in 5 years' time, I'm very interested in that.
Thank you. So are you saying our students are the problem?
Not exactly, they're pretty bright. In fact, you know, the younger they are, the brighter they are.
Interesting that, isn't it? Okay, we've gone into the next row. Oh, I can see the microphone's just getting handed around. It's landed in your lap, you lucky thing.
No.
Don't
disappoint. Hi, I'm Narinda, and I teach on the RMIT course part-time. I teach ethics and governance. And ethics and governance is very difficult to teach to fresh students who've got no working experience, walking them through all the code of corporate governance and board of directors and things like that. So that takes a lot of industry knowledge to put them through that. Why I'm here this morning, attending any conference is always a joy for me because I know I can come here and network and learn something new, update myself.
Thank you for that. That's fantastic. I'm going to go across to Laura and Gavin. Have you got something from the online community?
Yeah, so we had the first person was asking for a magic solution. So I don't think that's going to happen, but nice try.
Magic solution to what?
That's the question. He did not specify.
Yep.
But we have many people that say like they're looking how to improve the engagement online with students, how to better blend maybe online with offline. You can read some specific ones out.
Yeah. And how do you use technology to better augment into your classes to have a more holistic teaching environment?
Oh, there's some really fantastic ideas for things that we might sort of talk about as we go through today, especially when we come to the opportunity for you to ask questions. So make sure as you're going through today that you write down your questions, get your questions going so that we've got plenty to answer. Now I'm going to go just another sort of few rows back up into the room there. I can see a man hugging a white bag and he's smiling at me. And he has, oh, that's you. Yes, it's you. Yes, you. So anybody who smiles at me must introduce themselves.
Oh, hi, I'm Sam. So actually,
Hello, Sam.
I teach here, and I'm on a scholarship given by the Institute of Adult Learning to research on engagement online.
Oh, fantastic.
So I have to learn more pedagogies and tools, and I'm here to listen to what you have to say, other people have to say.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint you today because it sounds to me like you've got a lot that you already know, and I look forward to your contribution into the question time as well. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Okay, now I've got two people in the back row, and there's a guy who's got his hat on, and in his hand he's got a weapon of destruction. He didn't even realise that I was referring to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you for selecting this gentleman.
That's okay.
Yeah, very good morning to you, Dr. Belinda. And the purpose of coming here is to fellowship with all my good old friends. We have not met, I think, for the last 2-3 years already, thanks to COVID, or no thanks to COVID. So hopefully learn a lot more from you in your topic of discussion. I think this will be a very interesting few words here. Working from home and learning from home, and of course, learning at work at the same time.
All of it, I know.
So
all three.
I was told that we are supposed to have a balanced lifestyle by practicing the 888 model, whereby you spend 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, and 8 hours of discretionary time. So I would like to learn from you from today onwards. Thank you.
Discretionary time. Well, I don't mind if you are on your phones. I did actually learn from another colleague. He used to call them weapons of destruction. But these days we are always connected. We are always looking to see. We're messaging, we're Instagramming, we're posting, we're doing all sorts of wonderful things, which I'm sure is part of the social media today. Now, before I start, is there any final words from the online community?
Yeah, we have two more questions. How do you deal with when learners feel learning at home is not as valuable as the face-to-face experience?
And the other is, how do you get students to turn on their cameras?
Ah.
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
Maybe that's what the magic wand was for.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
No,
it.
that's a really interesting one, isn't it? The turning on your camera thing. There's been a lot of debate about that, you know, when through the remote piece. Now, I'm going to go off this for the minute because are these back on again? Now they're back on again. Good. I'm sure the clever tech people up in the box will help me out. Thanks, Gavin and Laura. Really appreciate that. Online people, make sure you're focused because you never know when I might turn to you and ask you for something. Okay, well, let's get started. You've given me a few things there that we'll address as we go through, but I'm going to start off with what I normally do is I kind of reinterpret the topic. So I've sort of come up with this new heading, which I think is very apt at the moment, that the whole thing that we're working from home, we're learning from home, and we're learning at work as well. And these are contextual drivers, which I'm going to focus on in the first part of my talk today. So, three aspects to this. First is really what's happening in our external environment. And there have been things that have been mentioned both by your president and also your vice rector today, which I'll probably speak to as well, which some of that you will know well. And I've tried to adapt this to Singapore context, and I found some really interesting data, which you may or may not have seen, but I look forward to sharing with you as well. I also then want to talk about, well, what do all these contextual drivers mean for educational providers? And then, how does that connect to what you can actually do? My understanding of your model here and how you work with the different providers means that sometimes you're working within a set of barriers and constraints which dictate what you can and what you cannot do. And I'm going to probably lay out a challenge to you today about being courageous about what you can do. And actually, as the educator, when you're in the classroom and you're with your students, you have a lot of control and power in that moment, and you're able to do things differently. So I was told today by some of my colleagues here in the front row to be courageous almost myself. And to send home some different kinds of messages, but I sense that there is change in the air. So I'm sure that whatever I say today will be taken within the context of where it's given, and I hope not to offend anyone in any way. I'm also happy to be interrupted, so if any of you get really brave here in the audience and want to put up your hand, don't hesitate to do so. I would really love you to interact with me, and if you're a little closer, I would have probably insisted that you do interrupt me. And for the online people, don't hesitate to keep those questions or commentary going, because I know that Laura and Gavin will be watching those for me. And if Laura and Gavin, you want to interrupt me at any point with a comment, don't hesitate to wave madly at me, and I will stop and we'll take some of those comments. So probably these 9 boxes that you see here, there'll be lots of things in here that are familiar with you. For you. I believe you will get a copy of this presentation pack, so don't feel you have to write copious notes if you don't want to. But, obviously, we've been through this amazing change. This last 3 years, in fact, I was just saying to your president, I don't really understand what really happened in the last 2 years. Time just sort of zipped past us. And here we are back together today, and it's almost like nothing has happened, except there are a bunch of you still wearing masks. And I would suspect that our hygiene has changed. And I suspect that we're not rolling in for lots of handshakes and hugs and kisses in quite the same way as we did before. There are some things that have changed for us during this period of time. But it has just kind of slipped past. And we went into this emergency mode of remote teaching online. And as we've heard by your vice rector and your president, we all acknowledge there wasn't really online learning. We were forced into this situation to do something to keep education going because the world couldn't stop. We had to keep going, because what would have happened if we did? And we know that in some parts of the world that there were millions and millions of children in particular who were unable to continue their education and will forever remain behind the rest of the world. So it's really interesting to hear your Vice-Chancellor and your Rector sort of talk about, access and equity and equality and what it means to have an education. I think what has sort of rolled out of this, though, and a lot of universities in Australia, and some of my colleagues in the US and the UK have said this too, is that because we were forced to go online, suddenly all our digital capability lifted. And so all those people who were considered perhaps Luddites, who could barely use their email, were now being forced to use tools in the online learning environment, which they'd never used before. Getting used to Teams, getting used to Zoom, getting used to, there's a whole raft of these video programs that we're all using. But I suspect you're all still having meetings. Who still forgets to take their mute off? Inevitably, there is someone in every meeting that you have to say, could you take your mute off, please? Because they forget. So I think we've still got a long way to go, haven't we, in terms of how we engage with our technologies. But what the pandemic did do was probably bring an entire workforce across many, many nations up to a really basic level of digital literacy, because we had to. You couldn't. And if you couldn't engage with the basics of using online tools for projecting, and whatever tool that was, well, then you weren't in the game. You just weren't in the game. You couldn't participate. And if your students couldn't do that, they couldn't participate in their education either. So there has been this general lift. And in some places, they've said that academia in particular has moved forward 5 years, just within 2 years, because of that. Prior to that, there just was not the imperative at all, to engage with these tools in exactly the same way. And at the same time, you've seen technology just go crazy. Technology is developing at a pace that we just don't recognise, really. When I look at computing power and what's happening in computing power around the world, it's just absolutely extraordinary. And online learning is definitely on the rise. Within your institution alone, you're now seeing you've got online programs. You're working with an OPM, a partner, to help you deliver that. But you're not alone. Every university across the world is now doing some form of online learning, either fully online, it's either hybrid, it's high flex, it's everything, it's every modality all at the same time, which presents educational institutions with enormous challenges in terms of where their focus needs to be. Sitting around that, you've also got a whole range of smart systems. So, I was just seeing your new platform. That's a smart system in a sense. It's about supporting you all, bringing you together as a community, and it underpins what you do. But there's a whole range of smart systems that sit around supporting our students as well. And through COVID, we learned how to do different things. I don't know if it happened here, but in Australia, we saw counselling sessions occur in the online environment as well. Support for students in their academic writing, their academic digital literacy. All of these things happening within the online environment in new ways. New mentoring platforms emerged for students to sort of speak with other students as well. So all of these digital capabilities and smart systems underpinning what we're doing in the future, and all escalating what we can do in learning and teaching in a way that we've never seen before. We've also seen the role of universities change. And I'm going to talk quite a lot about the future of work in a moment and how that's changed, and also the skill shortages. And I see that Singapore has not been left out of that either, and the big push towards reskilling and upskilling, which is why I think the micro-credentials aspect of what SIM may be doing in the future is absolutely critical for supporting the workforce here in Singapore and potentially globally, given you have a considerable number of international students as well. So this new context is driving a whole range of different priorities across the globe. For businesses and for governments, I've got 4 key things there. There's a real shift towards knowledge economies. You've got a strengthening of the Sustainable Development Goals. For better or for worse, that focus on the environment and climate is increasing, and we're seeing that as it plays out globally in front of all of us. There's a real desire across the globe to talk about social impact and the impact that we're having on the world and the people that live around us. Singapore's always really been famous for that, though. You have it inbuilt in you, in terms of that social impact and the values that you carry as a country. So I think that augurs really well for what the future world is looking for in that landscape. We could do with a little bit more of that in Australia. That sort of being kind to your neighbour and looking after each other is really important. And then the ongoing national skills shortages. Singapore's not alone. That's everywhere. It's happening across the globe. This is a great time for educators. But it's how we approach that and what we do to capture that as new markets that's going to be really challenging. And then on the individual side, you may recognise some of these things, and like the gentleman at the back who said 8 hours study, 8 hours sleep and 8 hours for fun, well, I interpreted it as fun, that people want different things. They've come out of this pandemic wanting something more. Their well-being and their enjoyment has become much more critical to them. Their personal goals and fulfilment, what does the world matter to me? What's my purpose in the world? How do I contribute to that? Very important. The experiences that they want to have are more than just work and study and play. Those things are merging, morphing together more than ever. And the experiences of being with others have become very important. You're all testimony to that. You're here today. Now, you might just be all the extroverts and all the introverts are online, because the introverts can't bear the thought of having to come and sit with you all. But you as extroverts, you can just hardly wait to get together and have a good chat and to eat and play together, which is quite good fun. So we're meeting lots of different learning styles here, aren't we, in a sense? But that's a great generalisation for me as well. And then obviously, saving money versus spending it. I think people are becoming much more conscious about, what they're doing and what they're purchasing, what they're buying and how they are participating in the world that we live in, and what that actually means on a social impact front as well. So in Singapore, I'm going to talk to Singapore specifically in a moment, but these graphs here and the information that you see here come from an American company called Manpower. You can post this event, look this up. I've got the link for you if you like. You can explore it. But they basically surveyed 40,000 employees across 40 different countries, created 40 different country profiles about what's happening at the moment around the global talent shortage. But you can see here that 2022 really stands out as, this is a significant change to what we've seen in previous years. And then, looking at the size of companies and the difficulties they're having, actually, finding employees. Now, when I was walking around Singapore yesterday, I saw loads of signs. I could have worked at multiple shops in the shops that I went into. I could have served ice cream. I could have worked for your transport system. In fact, I nearly took a whole bunch of photos of it all just to prove to you what I'm observing. But I think you might be observing that as well. In terms of some specifics for Singapore, the impact of COVID and what companies are actually doing at the moment, none of this will probably surprise you. That acceleration of digital processes and in the workplace, providing more opportunities for people to work remotely. If Singapore is going anywhere like we are in Australia, we've got huge union enterprise agreements now that are actually laying into those agreements that people can work from home 2 days a week. Sometimes, people are working from home all the time. In the job that I currently do, I can work whenever I want, however I want, and find my own adventure, which is amazing, as long as I deliver the outcomes and that my clients and the people that I work with have confidence that they're getting the work that they actually need. There's also a real acceleration of upskilling and reskilling programs, so that if you can't get workers into your place of employment, then you've got the workers you've got to upskill and reskill. And I think we can see a bit of evidence of that here today, and what SIM's trying to do. They obviously don't want to lose you as their workforce, so they need to ensure that they're upskilling and they're reskilling you to work in this contemporary world that we're in. There's also, if you can't find a worker, then you can actually take who is in your current workforce and push them into another area and then skill them. And that's a really big shift that's happening in a lot of places as well. So probably nothing there that you would go, oh yeah, we kind of knew that, but whether you knew the extent of it. I thought this could be interesting too. In terms of the top 5 in-demand roles, and when you look at the curriculum that's being offered by SIM and the kinds of things you might do when you think about, for example, micro-credentials and where you aim what you're actually giving to the community in terms of your product offer, these are probably areas to think really carefully about. And then the top 5 soft skills perhaps shouldn't be a surprise to you either. However, if you go and have a look at this work, you can have a look at how you compare to other countries and which skills are more important in those different countries. But all those things on the right there, your soft skills. Now, when you're in your classrooms and you're working with your students, you know, the lecture tutorial model has been dominant for so long, far too long. It's the easiest way to actually impart knowledge. You stand at the front, you open up a student's head and you pour some stuff in, you close their head again and off they go and you've taught them. That's the lecture. Now that's pretty harsh of me to say that, but there is so much research now that indicates to us, and I've already seen a few people in this room having a little nod off, so you get to the 10-minute mark, you need to do an activity, because if you don't do an activity, people are going to fall asleep. So this is your second activity. Could you turn to the person next to you again? In fact, instead of turning next to them, turn behind you. Have a chat to someone behind you, and those who don't have someone behind you, I guess you'll have to talk to each other. But talk to the person behind you there and just say, where do those top 5 skills come into your pedagogy? Not into the curriculum, but into your pedagogy, how you teach. Now, those people who are online, could you do exactly the same thing, please? Could you put into the chat your thoughts on how you include any of those top 5 skills into your current pedagogy? I'll give you a few moments to do that.
In the meantime, we had 2 questions on the online Q&A platform.
I might get those in a moment. I'll let these guys have a little chat.
Right.
I'll come across and have a look. I still see there's one man in the middle on his own. You might like to sit with your colleagues, but don't feel you have to, but you might like to. Okay, so hopefully you've had a moment or two to think about that. I've got 2 questions from online, so I'm going to take one of those questions first, and then my people with the roving mics, I'll get you to get up there towards people. And I don't want to single people out, so hopefully someone will put up their hand. And if you don't want to be picked, don't look at me and smile. Okay, let's take a first question.
All right. Hi, Dr. Belinda. At a recent Quality Matters talk, it is mentioned that when learner invests in learning, there is ownership. Please share some learning strategies to invoke active learning online.
Oh yes, active learning online. And that whole that first part of that question, which is really around our internal, extrinsic and intrinsic motivations for learning. And so I like to think of it this way. Whenever a learner comes to you, into your classroom, they come with you with the expectation that they are going to learn something. That's what they come with. But what do we do as teachers in that moment? Quite often, we actually turn that lovely motivation off. One of my favourite stories is when a young person comes into the university and says, I want to become an engineer. And so what do we teach them in their first subject? Are there any engineers in the room? No? All right, let's use accounting. I want to be an accountant. So what do we teach them in their first subject? Probably lots of maths. Yeah? We don't teach them how to be an accountant in the first class, do we? We don't tell them what it's like to be an accountant. They don't know what it's like to be an accountant, but that's what they think they've come to be. And so there are things that we can do as educators in those very first moments, that every time a student steps into your classroom, they're there because they have chosen to be there, like you have chosen to be here today. And you as the educator are the single point of influence in that you can either make or break that intrinsic motivation like that. So it's very, very important that you understand the motivations of someone's intrinsic desire to be here in front of you, because then you can actually support them on their journey. So I think if anyone wants to do any reading or looking at that, just get on to Mr. Google or Mrs. Google and have a look at intrinsic, extrinsic motivation. But think about it in that terms of, what does the first class look like? And every time a person steps into your classroom, what is it that you're doing to support the intrinsic motivation they have to actually be there with you in that moment? That's really, really important. And I'll come back to the online stuff as we get cracking. But I'd like to get at least 2 or 3 people who would like to contribute from that question. Have I got any volunteers? I already picked on the man with the hat before. Yeah. He's done his bit. So who else would like to just do a quick contribution? Nobody's looking at me because they're scared I'm going to pick them. What if I said, the person with the mask? Does that strike fear and dread that you might have to say something? All right, I'm not going to pick on you, but just watch out next time I just might. Hopefully you had some conversation though around, which of those 5 soft skills are you building into your curriculum and how that works for you in that teaching moment. So in terms of the talent shortages in Singapore, here are the top ones that were revealed from this survey, and what companies are actually doing about it in terms of their talent strategies. And they're doing things like investing in learning and development. They're going to the external market and advertising and trying to recruit people. They're also borrowing, like they're cultivating communities of talent outside of their organisations and using third parties more to support them. And they're also helping people to move up to new roles within an organisation as well. So that's that upskilling and reskilling. In terms of the responses to shifting skills needs, this sort of data, I think, sort of supports exactly what I was just saying before in terms of, of what companies are actually trying to do and how they're actually supporting their employees. And I think my favourite slide of this whole piece around the data in Singapore is my next one, which actually on the left there you can see what companies are actually doing. And the number one thing that they're doing is that they're supporting their staff internally. Have a look where private institutions are and have a look where public institutions are in supporting that agenda. It's kind of quite shocking, really, because you would hope that your education institutions, and this picture is the same in Australia, it's the same in the UK, it's the same in the US, is that there's been this real shift in terms of where education actually happens. I think this represents an opportunity. But the problem that you're trying to address here is how these businesses actually perceive education training institutions and whether they can see that we add any value. So this is a huge opportunity as we sort of think about what the future looks like. And for that person at the very beginning who sort of talked about, what are the future trends like? I think this is a future trend. And I think that you will see across the globe that there is a disaggregating and a disestablishing of, whether a formal qualification is actually needed anymore, and that companies are actually building out their own qualification frameworks and ways of upskilling and reskilling because the education sector is not perceived as being able to partner well enough with industry to deliver what they actually need. So that's actually really critical and really important. Now, have you got another question that might be relevant to this one?
Well, we had some comments to your
good. Yeah, let's do some comments.
Assignment, to your homework assignment. So I'll just read some out. Chin Ong says, I tell my students that the key to doing business school is to learn think. Information is easily available, but the thinking you have to bring with you.
Yeah, really contributes to the knowledge economy, doesn't it?
Then Chang Er says, I ask them to discuss and present using MS softwares, and they learn IT skills.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Hopefully. Sabrine Wong says, put out open questions in menti.com and solicit answers from the students.
And give me one more.
Oh, that one jumped. Why is a very powerful word.
Yes.
When asked, it invokes the brain cells to work magic.
Yes, it does, actually. I think the why and maybe the what question as well. those two questions are really the big open questions, aren't they, that force you to think and do things differently. And when you're thinking about those key soft skills in terms of critical thinking, analysis, creative originality, reasoning and problem-solving skills, those questions definitely, contribute to that. But let's move into education as well and the trends that we're seeing here. Again, that increased acceptance of what's happening in online, transforming, career planning and all the other services that have ordinarily been face-to-face, and also shifting into these hybrid places and into online places as well. And the distinctive learning experiences with employers, where you're co-curating and you're mentoring and you're working with each other to deliver education that people would say is equivalent to the face-to-face or in-person education. Now, I think there's always been a danger here in that we set up that face-to-face learning is better than online learning, and it's very black and white in that sense, that's either this or that, and that whatever might sit in between, is not going to be as good as what we really want to do, which is face-to-face. I think there's been enough literature, and I think the man who's doing his doctoral studies or his scholarship at the moment would understand this too, that the literature in online education, distance education, and these other modalities other than face-to-face have demonstrated over the last 30 years that the pedagogical basis of fully online, when done really well, can be as good or if not better. And in fact, there was an American study a few years ago that indicated that online learning was in fact probably better than face-to-face learning, because the effort that goes into designing a very good online experience is not the same effort that goes quite often into designing a face-to-face experience. In fact, quite often lecturers turn up on the day with their notes they've had for many, many years, and off they go, and they're doing their teaching experience as they always have done. And that's very, very common. You're not alone in that. That happens everywhere. So the effort that goes into designing learning needs to be not only in the online and the hybrid, but also needs to be in the face-to-face. And being that prepared as you go into classrooms is really very, very important. And we could learn lessons from our primary and secondary school teachers who all have to do lesson plans and prepare fully and carefully. But hybrid learning has become the big thing. And obviously HyFlex as well. Now HyFlex, they use a lot of terms at the moment, but HyFlex is like now. I've got a classroom of online people here that I have to make sure I'm interacting with, and I've got a classroom of people sitting in front of me. This is HyFlex, and this is very much what the future looks like, and being able to engage with those people who are people I can't see. And someone was saying before that, well, what about people who need to turn their camera on? Well, in a moment like this in a classroom when I'm teaching HyFlex, it doesn't matter if I can't see them. I know that they're there. I can't see them. I can't possibly see them. Unless I'm in the Harvard Business School and I've got a bank of cameras behind me, and you've seen their beautiful, HyFlex classrooms where all the people that are online would be there and you'd be able to see them. But this is the reality and the pragmatics of the world that we live in. You're going to have students who are online right now, like this, as well as in the classroom in front of you. And you have to now be aware as educators if you've got a multiple audience, not just one anymore. And that is incredibly challenging. Any comments so far from anyone around that?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, how does it feel, I can't see their eyeballs. I can't see the whites of their eyes to see, are they engaged? Are they listening? Are they doing something else? They probably are. Are they cooking? Are they making a cup of coffee? What are they doing while they're listening to this? And does it really matter in the learning experience? And these are some of the challenges we have as educators. That big one there is about a reason to come to campus is really important. Why should someone be here? What value add is there when if all you're going to do is talk to me, I can get that online, that's fine. What is the actual reason I need to be here? And I loved it that the man with the hat, I wish I knew your name, but man with the hat said he wanted to be here because he wanted to see his colleagues. He wants to network with you. He wants to know what everyone's been doing. He wants to connect. And that's really, really very important for some of our learners. But that's a good enough reason for him to come in today to give up his Saturday morning and probably what was going to be a leisurely breakfast with family and friends, I suspect. So thank you for coming again today. And of course, that link to short form courses, I think that's a huge trend. So people who are thinking, what does the future look like? That whole piece of being able to stack, you know, that you can, and I will talk about micro-credentials and the different models that sort of work with that. It's incredibly important. And then aligning your programs with the market and that deep connection with industry, which was the whole reason for sort of demonstrating, well, what does Singapore actually need now? Well, you need to make sure that your programs are deeply connected to the society and the context that you live in, so, and, you know, co-develop those courses with industry so they're not building out their own capability. You saw that figure of, you know, nearly 43%, but they're actually respectful of the education institutions that can work with them to help support them in terms of the type of workforce that they need for the future. I mean, when you think about education in terms of disruption, it has not experienced the same disruption as you've seen in many other industries. You know, we haven't got the grab of education. Like last night I did Grab, you know, where you order your food online. You know, that whole industry has been disrupted. There hasn't been the Uber moment for education in the same way. Perhaps COVID was. Perhaps COVID has sort of shifted the way we think about education has to happen. We've been very slow to change. I mean, even today in this presentation, here I am lecturing at you, but I'm telling you that it's not a great format. It's not the best way to learn. But these are the formats that we still persist in using. I mean, it's lovely to be here, and I'm a bit of an extrovert, so I'm with all you extroverts. I'm here in the room with you. I really love that. That's wonderful. And I've done lots of speeches and things online, but I like to be able to see people, and I like, look at the smile. It's just like, oh, thank you. I love it when you can actually sort of see people's faces and you can interact on that personal level with them. I think the other thing we've been slow to do is really think about how the applied curriculum, or the authentic curriculum, if you want to call it that, or the authentic assessment piece actually relates to context. And I think that's incredibly important. So when SIM is thinking about its cohorts of students and who those students are, getting that balance between the international case study and the local case study and how that applies into local environments is incredibly important for you, for your students, so that they can see themselves. Remember, if you go back to that, like the reason they turned up to your class on that day may not just be because they have to be there because you told them, but it's because they're intrinsically motivated because they know what they want to do next and where they want to go to. And therefore, your curriculum and the way you engage with them needs to reflect and respect that in lots of ways. The social constructivist, or the constructivist approach to education, is really about you, me and us. That's how I think about it. You bring something here today, I bring something, but it's what we actually make between us that is actually the most important part of the construction of ideas and knowledge. It's not what I open your head and pour in and close the lid on. So many of you will be disappointed today that I won't give you the answers, because I actually want you to construct the answer with me, because it has to be relevant to you and your context. That's really, really important. And it's very important to the cohorts of students that you have in terms of the context that they come from and the context within which they have to work as well. The perceptions of online learning have changed. This is research from Australia. I couldn't find any relevant local research for Singapore. However, there is some evidence that suggests that the perceptions of online learning have changed, particularly for postgraduate students. Postgraduate students love it, adult learners. They can work their entire life around not having to come to class, you know, on a Thursday at 1 o'clock to do a lecture. Now that's me. Through COVID, I decided, even though I was provost and I was very, very busy, that I needed something else to do. So I went back to university. I live on a farm, so I thought I'm going to study some horticulture because I want to grow raspberries. Actually, I wanted to grow garlic, but now I want to grow raspberries. I needed to understand soil science. So I did a full year of online horticulture soil science, where I had to take my own soil samples, I had to do my own tests, my own experiments, etc. It was fantastic. Ordinarily, that class, you have to go to university and you have to be in the laboratory and you have to do all the experiments there. But I did them all myself. It was absolutely the most amazing learning curve that I've ever had. And I tell you what, my soil is looking pretty damn good at the moment. And my first lot of raspberries have now gone in. So if it ever stops raining in Australia, I might get a crop of raspberries this summer. But I went to re-enrol in the second class this year. I thought, right, okay, now that I'm not working at a university, I definitely must have some more time, right? So I tried to enrol in my second class of my graduate certificate in horticulture, and I could enrol in it, but I had to go to campus. Now, I'm caring after my 2 elderly parents, I'm working part-time, I'm on 3 boards, I don't have time to go to Melbourne. I live an hour outside of Melbourne, and the lecture was at 1 o'clock on Thursday afternoons, followed by a 2-hour tutorial in the laboratory. So what did I do? I didn't enrol. In fact, I discontinued that course, and I enrolled in a micro-credential out of a UK company for about $150 that would give me almost the same thing in terms of the design of the raspberry orchard. But that was a very disappointing moment for me when that university, which is a top university, was so innovative through COVID. But then it shifted, and they lost me as a postgraduate learner, full-time worker, who was earning and learning, who could have been one of their students. Very disappointing, you know. So even the most practical subjects can be done in that online environment. And that perception, for me, really around, you know, being able to learn it myself. And I think somebody asked a question online before around that, you know, the intrinsic learning and why you want to be there. Definitely wanted to do this. I really need to know about soil science. So anyway, that's probably diverging, but I think it's an interesting representation of probably what a lot of adult learners are feeling, is that compulsion that we must make people come to campus at a certain time to do something that tends to be at our convenience and not at theirs. This is more research that comes from Australia, and this comes from the company that I currently work with, which is Deloitte and Deloitte Access Economics. And what you can see here is, you know, a different sense of all the different skills that are currently in demand, and that people are looking for different kinds of things which are not necessarily degrees or formal diplomas. They're looking for a whole range of different things. And you can see in the right-hand side of that, the employer-provided training is continuing to dominate, which is sort of borne up in terms of the data I showed you about Singapore as well. So, and I think, you know, what is interesting when you start to look at this is where the opportunities are for your lifelong learners, because you can't just do a degree or a certificate these days. We're all working for far too long. Knowledge changes so quickly. You need to be interacting with the world and creating new knowledge. So this is where this credential landscape is really important to us. So in this credential landscape, you've got on that top left-hand side the formal acknowledged degrees, diplomas and certificates. You've got the non-status awards that sit underneath that in the bottom left-hand side. And, you know, and that could be some of the internal professional development. Like the work you're doing today, you'll probably get a certificate of some kind for this, but you're not being assessed on it. You don't have to provide any evidence of learning. You know, so that's that kind of non-status awards professional development. Top right-hand side sort of sits all your micro-credentials. They're the formal and semi-formal. They're the accredited ones and the ones that are stackable. And we might say, you know, some of the work that, you know, you see that Google and Microsoft do and all the certifications, they will probably sit in that bucket, you know, of the micro-credentials. And then you've got the nano-credentials, you know, the digital badges and certificates that we see from places like the Coursera's and the Future Learns and, you know, the Udemy and all those sorts of places as well. But when we look at that in terms of how that then gets segmented, you know, in terms of, you know, how this alternative credentialing system works, it sort of then breaks out into a whole range of different opportunities. And this is where I think it's very exciting for organisations like SIM in particular, because you are a private university, you have that opportunity to be nimble and to respond to the market in a very different way. So when you think about the short courses and badges, Then you've got, your boot camps that go with that as well. And when you're trying to, someone said, oh, well, I'd like some tips and tricks. Okay, so you've got a whole pile of students who come to you every week over 12 weeks or however long your term is. They sit in a classroom and you talk to them about accounting practices, etc., etc. I don't mean to just be picking on accounting, but just say, for example, and they do some tutorials. But you see over time, class attendance probably declines. They're not as interested, you're not as interested, or maybe they have to be there, but they don't seem very engaged. Well, why not shuffle that, shake that up, throw that into the air and say, we're going to have a 2-week boot camp and you learn the whole thing in 2 weeks. Now, that doesn't mean you stand in front of these poor students and just open up their heads and pour it in, but you do an applied, practical approach in terms of engaging with those learners in a different way. So it's not an hour every week. It could be, we're coming in 2 weeks, it's going to be full on. We're going to have a real example from a real company and we're going to work on that. I'm going to learn all these concepts. Now, you might be, aware of problem-based learning and those sorts of approaches. Boot camps are essentially like a problem-based learning approach. It's just a different way of thinking about it. And so that level of engagement that is required from the learner means that they actually have to think, which is what we were talking about before, wasn't it? There's someone sort of said there, that when you ask the why question, you have to think, have to do something, set somebody a problem and let them go running with it. It's, there are so many ways that we can do that in our pedagogies. So I'll leave that one with you because I think that your senior managers might find that interesting in terms of how they think about the future. So let's move on to the learner experience, and really they do. They want a reason to come campus now. And been through COVID, they know they can do it online. If you're just going to talk at me, well, then I can just be online and you can talk at me because I can do other things at the same time. Actually, I should confess here that through COVID, there were some meetings where I didn't have my camera on and I was actually baking in the kitchen. Now, I shouldn't confess that, but I will because that's the reality. And there were lots of people like that. But another reason why students didn't put their cameras on, and a lot of reasons why staff did not put their cameras on in meetings, is because some of them were embarrassed about where they were. We had some students that were in cars, in car parks. We had some students that were in share houses. We had some staff that were living at home with their parents and were maybe embarrassed about that, I don't know, or were in conditions where they didn't want to be seen. So there are lots of reasons why learners and staff do not put their cameras on, which are not necessarily that they're trying to hide from you. It's because there may be other reasons for why that's the case. I do know that we had lots of families, with lots of kids, and I know that some of the times that when they did not have the cameras on, they had kids on laps, they had kids in the background. They were trying to manage the lives as best they could in those moments. So I think we need to be careful when we say that, how do we get them to turn their cameras on? But it could be because of those circumstances. I did actually have to hold some meetings in my car, in a car park, because I live in a country area and we'd had a huge storm and we lost all our internet. I had to do these meetings. So I was in my car and I remember people saying to me, turn your camera on. I said, look, I'm only going to turn it on for a second because I'm in my car and I feel really embarrassed. And I turn it on really quickly, so I'm just in my car. And then people are like, why are you in your car? It's like, well, because there was a storm and we lost the internet and I needed to come somewhere where there was internet. So, we all have, different reasons for that. But there are students who just don't turn their cameras on. And I think the reason they don't turn their cameras on is because they are in their pyjamas, that they're not in their best form and shape. They're not concentrating. And I suspect that that could be the same with some of the adults as well. That, I'm not dressed for the occasion. Well, frankly, you're at work. Whether you're on camera or whether you're in the room, you should be presentable and ready for work. So I was very tough about that with my teams of people. But these 4 things here, the reasons for wanting to come to campus really sit around what kind of student engagement is there? What are you doing with students? And what does that look like? What activities are there and how does that connect with the curriculum? So if you're studying accounting, what specific activities are there for accounting students? What things for them specifically for accounting students? And that could be said about any kind of student. How does the extra or co-curricular actually connect to the curriculum? Not as kind of it's a special add-on and we just provide it because we should, but how does it actually connect and become part of the real learning experience? That integrated degree and non-degree offerings. So wouldn't it be fantastic when and in fact we've seen this across the globe, is many universities now are saying you graduate not only with your degree, but also with a credential. So not only do you leave with your degree in accounting, but you're also going to leave with your micro-credential in cybersecurity, which makes you very employable. So there's things like that to think about. The lifelong learning and the industry alignment. Well, if I'm going to come to campus as somebody who is studying postgraduate and I'm trying to upskill myself, then I want to really know how it applies to industry. One of my favourite things of the horticultural course was the virtual visits that we did to the different garden production centres, and they talked about soil on a commercial basis. That was incredible. So there was a reason for me to come. It was directly applicable and applied to the coursework I was doing. So for you as the next generation of educators, I would say these 7 buckets here are the things that you should be considering, that you should be thinking about. Those changing learner preferences. Learners do want to be at home now. They've got other things that they're doing and they're juggling. And if they haven't got that reason to come to campus, well, don't expect them to come. If it's not going to be exciting, motivating and build on their intrinsic motivations, then you need to ask yourself the question, what are you doing and what is your purpose as an educator in the constructivist environment of the you, me and us? And how you would ask that question of yourself in terms of, well, what does you, me and us look like with an online cohort as well? The renewed pedagogical innovation. I could stand here for hours and talk to you about all the different ways the different technologies can support you in terms of what you might do. And I'm sure that your learning and professional development team talk about those things with you as well. But there is a lot that we can do to build on the new skills that we learned through COVID. Technology is rapidly changing. There are so many tools that we use just within our learning environments now, just within Zoom, just within Teams. I predict in the future that the learning management system will probably disappear because you're going to see that personalised learning environment of all the different technologies that will come together like we do in terms of the apps on our phone. There'll be a bunch of those things that we'll use for different purposes which will ensure that our learning environment is more than just a storage place for materials. That renewed focus on upskilling and skilling in the marketplace is critical, and for your learners to feel that they're getting value for what they're doing, your curriculum needs to connect to that, and especially for Singaporean students, and that more strategic focus on partnerships. Everything that you do, in a sense, that has a focus on skills or the future or the destinies of where these people are going should be in partnership and have a relationship with the industries that they're connecting to. And that really strong industry basis will be exciting, it'll be energising, and it will make real for the learners what the future looks like. And then you've got the challenge on what is pragmatic. So if you were focusing on the learner journey, these are the 6 areas that I would suggest that you focus on. Focus on skills development, learner engagement as critical to ensuring that you keep that internal motivation alive and well so that your learners want to be here and want to be part of SIM and will be your future champions out there, that your student support, whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face, is just absolutely top-notch. The teaching quality, what can I say? There is no excuse for any teaching classroom or any teacher not to have a rating that is at the top of excellence than not. Because if you're not at the top of excellence, you have to ask yourself the question, then why are you here? Because if you're passionate about it, and you want to be a great teacher, then you will work on it and you will take the time to make sure that you're planned and that you're ready and that you're aligned with what the learners want. And you'll be committed to that. And you wouldn't be here today, I suspect, if you weren't. Learning resources are incredibly important. Being up to date is something I probably don't need to tell you about. And then flexibility. How is your different university partners and how is SIM going to work with increased flexibility? Are you going to insist that your students come to campus? Or are you going to be able to handle the high flex? Are you going to be able to trust your learners? How's that going to work for you? Because these are the kinds of decisions that you need to make, especially when you're talking about quality outcomes and engaged learners. So just to finish up here, in terms of what you can do, and I did say I'd probably disappoint some of you because I wasn't going to give you a big talk about digital tech, because it's not about the technology. It's about you as the pedagogue and about the decisions that you need to make. The technology is secondary, and digital tools will support you to deliver great learning outcomes and engaged learners. They are your modern contemporary tools, but they're not the reason why you teach. And in fact, any teacher who thinks that the digital tools are more important than the pedagogy, well, they're probably redundant. And you will make yourself redundant if you believe the technologies are front and centre. They are secondary to who you are as an educator, because what you bring is something that is absolutely critical in that relation of you, me, and building us. So here is a set of questions that you can ask yourself. I'm not going to go through them all. I'm only going to go through the broad headings, because I think this is something you can take away, that you could look at. And it could be something that your learning and development team might want to use with you as a framework to think about things. You know, what is the aspiration for your learners? What is your aspiration for them? And then balance that with what's their aspiration? What do they want? What can you realistically do differently? What constraints do you need to work within? What barriers are there? What opportunities are there? Understand your context. Where will you focus? What's going to be the most important thing here? Which areas in the previous 6 boxes will you focus on? Perhaps on the soft skills on an earlier slide. And what capabilities and resources do you need? Because as educators, you can't just pull it out of thin air. And so you have had a commitment today, it appears to me, from your senior managers at SIM to support you, to do things differently, to be creative, to be courageous. So that's a really important thing to remember. They're here to help you. And then what are the expected deliverables and outcomes? So if you are going to choose a piece of tech in your classroom, I would challenge any educator to say, well, what benefit does it give the students' learning outcomes? Will it make things better? Or is it just another trick? And it's filling time, it's wasting time, in fact, and real learning is not occurring, especially when you're thinking about the you, the me, and the us. So, don't lose focus on academic quality and excellence. Just remember the 3 R's: reputation, relevance, and recognition will follow. SIM will be known for these things if it focuses pedagogy and it leads and it supports the aspirations of both what you want to hope to achieve for your learners and what they expect to achieve as well. Now, just to finish things off, I'd like you to turn to the person next to you again, or the person behind you. In fact, this row of people here, you might just want to go to the row behind you. You must be sick of speaking to each other now. And talk to those people and ask those people, you know. And I've always had this thing that, like, if there's just one thing that you would take away from today, if there's one thing that you would take away and you think, oh, I might think about that different, I might do that different, or I learnt that, I'd like to know what that is. So you 5 there are 5 of you, go and sit behind you and talk to them. Man with a hat on, come down and join some of these people, because you like to be nice and social and extroverted. Get over there. This lady here who's just walking up the stairs, oops, she's trying to escape. She's escaping. Okay, bye. And this man on his own, you might want to join these guys down here in the front row. Up to you. Just take a few moments to think about what's the one thing you might take away. People online, exactly the same thing, and then we will be finishing up and rolling into our panel. Okay, online people, get to it. People next to each other, stand up maybe, talk to each other. We'll just give you 2 minutes and then we'll finish up.
We have quite some questions as well in the online section.
Excellent. Why don't you stand up? You've been seated down for so long. Stretch those knees. Give your shoulders a roll. Okay, let's finish this off now. If you'd like to just go back to your seats, or you can stay standing, I don't mind. I just want to thank you all for participating this morning and letting me pick on you as well. It's been lovely. I've put my email address up there, but you can also find me on LinkedIn, so don't hesitate to reach out if you ever would like to, or connect with me. I always love connecting with new people. I am not going to ask the audience because you don't like to be picked on, I don't think, so I'm not going to ask you. So you can smile at me still and breathe. I'm not going to ask you to answer a question. But I do have a question from somebody online, so I thought I might answer that question before we go to, I think we might be going to a little break. So.
Correct. Yes, Charles asked a question. In an online environment, the challenge is about ensuring that the person behind the screen is the real person, especially when it comes to delivering the work themselves. How do we deal with this?
Well, I mean, I think I spoke about that a bit before, about the reasons why people, aren't revealing themselves, and I think we need to think really carefully about why that matters. And so that would be the question mark that I'd ask back to the Charles is, why does that matter? And if it matters, then, perhaps going through a decision framework like I sort of suggested before, to think about, how people need to engage and want to engage, will be where you'll start. So start with the motivations of the learner and the preferences of the learner if you can. Yeah. I think there's loads more questions, but we could leave some of them for the panel, couldn't we? Yeah. Okay, so what's next? I was told I had a little bit of extra time, but I've gone through your break and I think we might be going to get a cup of tea or something.
I think before you go, Professor Tynan, we would like you to just stay on stage for a moment, and we would like to invite our Vice Provost, Dr. Timothy Chan, on stage to present to you a token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. No. Thank you. I hope so. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chan and Professor Belinda. We'll put it in a nice box so it's easier for you to carry back to Australia. Yes. Thank you once again, Professor Tynan, for that wonderful speech. And I think we are due for a short break. Let me just...
And I'm here, so if people would like to ask questions or talk to me at the break, I look forward to it. As an extrovert, I thrive on it.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Tynan. How much? I don't know.
Yeah, so we'll just do a short break. We were supposed to have a break from 11 till 11:15, but I think some people need to use the bathroom. So let's do a short break. Let's be back here at 11:30.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, everyone, please come back in. Take a seat. And these visuals on screen, that's the visual that Mr. Thumb made. So he took out all the pictures and basically made the notes for Belinda's keynote speech.
Okay, I hope
right.
everyone had
that
a
everyone?
good break. Are we all in? Are we ready to go? So before we proceed to the next segment, we would like to take some time to award some prizes. Last 2 weeks, we had some pre-event interactive content and competition, which saw many of you take part in. And I must say, especially for the quizzes, they got really competitive, like really competitive.
It got a bit competitive, yes. Can I bother someone from tech to change the slide, please?
Is there anyone?
Yes, next
Oh,
one. Thank you. All right. So, yes, we have some prizes. We're awarding a prize for the discussion board contribution, for the photos, and for the quizzes. So the prize is your choice of one of these 3 books. You can get it in an ebook format or in a hard copy. And we will contact you after the event is over to note down your choice. So without further ado, our winners are...
So the winner for the discussion board is Ms. Jaslyn Lau.
Yes.
Congratulations.
And for the photos, we have 2 winners, Andrew Lowe and Charles T.
And the winners for the polls and quizzes are Mr. Peter Chan and Mr. Colin Smith.
Yes.
Congratulations, everyone.
Yes, congratulations. So, like I said, we'll be in touch with you after the event for your prize.
Okay, so now it's actually time for the second keynote. But unfortunately, she could not be here in person, but has recorded her session for us. Next
Someone change the slide, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the session will actually be available from 1 p.m. onwards on the virtual platform and will be available until the 10th of December. You will all have received the information on how to log into the platform about 2 weeks ago. But don't worry, if you cannot find that email or it went to spam, we will send it to you again to make sure everyone can enjoy this session.
Yes, and even the people that are here today, present physically, you also received a link for the platform about 2 weeks ago, but like Gavin said, we'll send another one, just to make sure that you get in.
Okay.
Can we change the slide, please? Thank you. All right, so for our next session, we will have a panel discussion. And once again, for everyone online, you can use the Q&A feature to ask all your questions. And the questions that were left unanswered from the previous session from Belinda's keynote, we will try and incorporate as many of them as we can as well in this panel. So without further ado, we welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, Professor Belinda Tynan, our resident directors at UOL, Dr. Zhang Zhenlin, from UB, Dr. Kevin McKelvey, and from SAMGE, Dr. Joshua Wong. We invite Academic Director for RMIT, Professor Mark King, and our moderator for this session, Assistant Dean Dr. Meilin Tan.
During this discussion, they will be looking into the challenges, opportunities, and experiences in pedagogical transformation in this digital learning age. So without further ado, I will welcome the panelists on stage, and please give them a round of applause.
Yes.
Over to you, Dr. Meilin.
Thank you, Laura and Gavin. Okay, thank you for everyone who is here for the panel discussion. We have here a distinguished list of panel members here, and I think we don't have to introduce Belinda, you've heard her. So perhaps we have, in the next 2 to 3 minutes, we'll have each panel members introduce yourselves, which program that you are representing. Initially, we had a plan to also for you to answer what are some of the learning that you have obtained in the past 2 years But now, since we have a lot more time, you can actually do the introduction first. Then we'll have more questions that we can address from the chat, as well as looking at how we can transfer what we have heard from Belinda to your respective programs. So maybe we'll just start with a short introduction first.
I guess I should start first. So hello everyone, I'm Dr. Joshua Wong. I represent the SIMGE local programs, so your diplomas, the foundation courses, certificates. I personally am in charge of the management foundation studies, which then leads to the diplomas for the management courses and then eventually to the university partners. I'm also currently running the graduate certificate in human resource management, and eventually will be leading a graduate diploma in human resource management, and eventually will be leading a graduate diploma in Industry 4.0 as well. Yeah, so I have management and taught in very different levels of the SIM programs. What else to say? I'm media trained. I teach IT courses and I manage business courses. So favorite color, blue.
Hi, I'm Mark King, professor and academic director for RMIT Singapore. I'm a psychologist and a cognitive ethnographer, and I look at the very short timescales of how human beings learn at the PICO levels. So using eye tracking methodologies, functional MRI, and other high-tech methodologies to understand human learning as it occurs in real time. I'm very interested in how the Singapore learner and our international students in our programs are engaging with us. And as some of you know, I've done a lot of observations of our courses in Singapore and would like to work with you in the coming years on how we can improve our learning outcomes for our students. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm Jen Lin. I was an SIM student a long time ago, 25 years ago. And subsequently, I joined SIM as a lecturer. And this is my 20th years with SIM, teaching, supporting students. And I am also working as an adjunct senior lecturer at the NUS College and NUS Economics Department. So I hope that I can share my observations across institutions in terms of teaching, engagements, student supports, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. As you can see, I struggle with technology, but I'm Kevin McKelvey, the resident director of the University at Buffalo program, and so much to say. I like Belinda, I think of myself as being a lifelong learner. I can't stop. I also am enrolling in a program now, having recently completed my doctorate. And I think I completed my doctorate actually just before the pandemic began. And I think that gave me insights. My program was an online program and made me very sympathetic to the challenges that were faced both by our faculty members and our students. But it was a wonderful experience for me to even be able to earn my doctorate here in Singapore from the US in an online format. So I have been an advocate for this kind of new way of teaching and learning from my own personal experience with that. And I'm happy to be here today to share about that some more. So thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you everyone for your introduction. I think most of you will know that who am I? So I'm Maylene, the Assistant Dean for the Academic Development. So basically events such as this are really organized by my team, and we are very happy to have this distinguished guest. So I think we want to kickstart this panel discussion to think about what Belinda has shared with us. She has shared with us what are some of the reasons that we want students to come back to the campus now that we are post-pandemic. And a very wise friend of mine in the social network says that the pandemic actually accelerated our need for action. But then now that it is post-pandemic, even within SIM, I think a lot of our classes now are back to in-person. Perhaps you all can share with your experience, if you're doing teaching in a classroom or you're managing a program, what are some of the transitions that you see and the changing preference of the students, and how do you actually manage that? Belinda, yeah, okay.
I think you've heard a lot from me, and I should make this lot work a bit harder, right? What I'm observing in Australian universities is that there's a shift towards student preferences and motivations for being both either on campus as a choice or online as a choice, and that they're almost demanding that their classes are like that, which is why I sort of quite strongly talked about they need a reason to come. Now, I believe the reason to come to campus is really around making knowledge together, and it sits around that constructivist and social constructivist theories that sit around in our pedagogies, and that for people to make real meaning of the world that we live in and knowledge is they need other beings to do that with. And whilst you can do some of that online, I think others will benefit from doing that face-to-face.
Thank you, Belinda. I think teaching and learning is essentially a social interaction. So yeah, how is that? How has been your experience? Yeah, and also managing your programs.
So it's actually a very challenging question, and we all come at this from our own epistemological and ontological perspectives and our own lived experience and how we learned as students and now as we teach or administer as institutional executives. If we take an ecological view on this, at the macro level, I think that for RMIT, we need to come back and look at first principles. What is our strategic intent around our transnational education programs? Why are we here, and why are we doing the things the way that we're doing them, and how can we improve that? Another part of that is what is our intention for our students? At the meso level, what kind of educational design do we use? What is the educational experience we're expecting our students to go through? What kind of integrated curriculum are we putting into place, and how are we managing and measuring how to improve that in ongoing iterations through as we deliver our courses? At the micro level, and Belinda touched on this a lot today, I think we need to understand our students much more than we currently do. We need to help them understand themselves much more than they currently do. Timothy brought up a really important point about the pedagogies of care. And there's a report just came out a couple days ago on structural MRI studies on students in America. Actually, through the pandemic, their brains have aged by several years than what is expected in a control group. So the stress that's in a company at social levels, at individual levels, and also at neurological levels are real. We need to redesign our pedagogies to increase interactivity. Belinda says, why did they come here for an experience? Well, they want to be with each other. They want to be with us as subject matter experts. They want to have industry connections. They want to be in an ecological system where they're in a process of movement, development, and becoming in whatever discipline they're in. There's significant technological and human challenges coming out of the pandemic, and I'm not so sure that we can say post-pandemic because the people have their own perceptions about what COVID actually is and where it is in their lives. There's a number of challenges that we need to address simultaneously in order to enhance the quality of the educational experience for our students. We have one of the RMIT staff or associate lecturers here who I did a classroom observation for 6 hours on, top notch. And if we can take some of the learnings from Belinda's approach to this and all of our collective experience here plus yours and learn from each other and implement those methodologies into the classroom, I think we can advance our learning in significant ways. So thank you.
Yeah, but I think it's for sure a lot of our associate lecturers here, you employ many evidence-informed strategies as shared by Mark, Professor Mark. Okay, I'm getting a bit nervous here, that's why. Okay, so I think collectively there's a lot of knowledge, and if there is a platform for us to share, definitely we can benefit many more people and scale this a positive student experience. We talk about providing care for our students and how the pandemic has actually regress some of their learning process. So this also implies a lot more workload for our associates because many of us here may not be in that position to make educational policy change. So I'm wondering within that constraints in your own classroom, I think some of us here do teach in a classroom as well. Any comments when you're wearing both hats as an administrator as well as teaching the students in the classroom? How do you navigate this tension? Yeah.
Do you mean between being online and face-to-face?
No.
Just in the classroom?
In the classroom, yeah, because a lot of our participants here, they are mainly working with students directly in the classroom, so they may not have that opportunity to make decisions. So it's good. I think SIM is moving towards a more student-centric education, but given the changes in terms of demands of students, to have more personalized attention, I'm just curious, people like Joshua or Jianling and even Kevin, in your interaction with your associates, how do you navigate that tension? Because policy is always trailing practice, you know? So what kind of advice can we give to our lecturers here?
Well, okay, I can speak to that a little bit since I was an associate for, I think, about a year before I became a full-time head of program. I think at some level there are obviously tensions between policy and practice, right? In my case, I think I'm concerned a lot with international students, right? Because I teach a lot of fundamental foundation studies courses. So these are students who just came out of their secondary schools, wherever they are, come to Singapore. A lot of them are learning subjects in English for the first time, right? So English as a medium of instruction is new to them. And they have to start to learn business jargon, they have to learn IT jargon, they have to learn all these technical terms, explained to them in a language they're unfamiliar with. So it's a big challenge, right? It's worse if it's online. One of the things which I found quite useful was that the international student experience, because of the pandemic, it has, to some extent, become harder to engage with them, right? Especially if they are allowed to study at home or work from home, because they don't get the social experience of interacting with their classmates and absorbing English subconsciously, right, through interactions with their non-international student friends, right? And that actually plays a big role, whether we realize it or not. The fact that we can group them together, international students and local students, and make them talk to one another, work together, work on a project together, which all went away during COVID, because we couldn't have any sort of group projects. Now that it's coming back, thankfully, I'm encouraging a lot more usage of group work and even class activities that are group-based in order to get them to interact with each other, to help them absorb English in daily dialogue, in order to help them process their assignments eventually and learn how to talk about their subject matter in English. Otherwise, in terms of engagement, I was actually hired as an associate lecturer during the COVID pandemic. So I've taught purely online classes, I've taught hybrid classes, I've taught, haven't taught a fully face-to-face class yet. I will do that eventually, I guess. And this has to do with the structure of how we structure our assignments, right? It does require a lot more work. I was talking to one of the lecturers just now over the break, how with SIM branded courses, oftentimes we have a set of lecture slides to work with. And we have a set of classroom activities. And the tendency is, especially for new lecturers, is to do all the lecture slides first, and then do all the classroom revision activities at the end, right? What I found to be more useful is to break it up. Because no one's going to sit there and watch you lecture for 2 hours. It's like watching a 2-hour YouTube video. No one does that, right? So instead of having, let's say, 2 hours of lecture and then like 10 MCQs at the end, have 10 minutes of lecture and then 1 MCQ. And then another 10 minutes of lecture, chunk the topics, and then 1 MCQ, right? Or 1 classroom activity. To break it up so that it feels more like a series of 10-minute YouTube videos and then an activity immediately to engage them, rather than a 2-hour lecture and a revision class at the end, right? That, to me at least, has worked better, I felt. The rest of you?
Yeah.
All right. I wanted to share with some of the observations on the ground for University of London program. Last 2 years, I think has been really challenging, I think, to students, to colleagues here. I have received numerous, actually, complaints and from parents that the kids were suffering from psychological stress because of the push to take lessons online. And it's immensely difficult to study alone in front of a computer. I mean, think about our own experience. Nowadays, most of us are work from home. My experience is it's so hard to concentrate, even for a very important meeting. when you instead of meeting colleagues face to face, you are basically talking through a monitor. It's much harder, and obviously it's even more challenging for students to learn difficult concepts, techniques, theories, without meaningful interactions. So last 2 years, actually, what I have learned is that the importance of teaching presence. I feel teaching is very much a social process. You need to have meaningful human interactions. I don't know whether that can be done or can be replaced online, but probably I have not found a solution. Okay, but I think the teacher presence is absolutely important. So I just want to share with colleagues, after last 2.5 years of challenges, for University of London program, we have decided, we have choose to go opposites to the above case. So we kind of discourage classroom recording instead of encourages. One of the class I taught, very challenging one called Statistics 2, is mathematical statistical theory. So initially I just follow, basically, we want to give student convenience. Student can choose to attend classes on-site or online. So it was interesting that first 2 weeks, because my admin colleague was not ready, so all classes are on-site. So I have good attendance. So after 2 weeks, when classes were recorded, and students know about the classes were recorded, the attendance dwindles by more than 50%. And then I went to take a look at the statistics of students, whether they have watched the recordings. Of course, you know the answer. So we couldn't find a solution for this procrastination mindset among the students. I know what they think. They thought, oh, anyway, recordings are there anyway. Yeah, I will go and watch it. But they will kick a can down the road, day after day, week after week. Right before the exam, it was just too late. So I wanted to emphasize the importance of teacher presence. Students need to feel the humanness, humanity, cares, right, and encouragements that the instructors give to learn in order for teaching to meaningfully take place. And if there is a blended, we have decided to, if there is a recording, then you don't need to come to class, all right? If you need to come to class, there will be no recording. It's either or. And that tends to work better. That's the experience we found. Now, if you offer recording or physical on-site classes, then actually we are doing disservice to students because we still have not found a way to overcome the procrastination mindset from, to help them. That's my observation. I know this is kind of surprise to maybe to some other people, but to many of my colleagues, they don't find it surprise. I think you agree with me.
Yeah, later we can touch on a little bit about students' ability to do self-regulation, and also Belinda touched on intrinsic motivation, and some of the methods that we are utilizing is actually extrinsic. But I just want to give opportunity to Dr. Kevin McKelvey to share his thoughts first before we dive into the next topic.
Okay, I would be happy to share my thoughts. I think of it as a kind of a broad historical perspective of looking at how things started at the beginning of the pandemic and where we are now, and the tensions, as you mentioned, of what we went through in the process. And so I learned a new phrase today, which was emergency remote education. That's very useful because that's exactly what we started out with. And so one of the first tensions that came along was once we shifted to online classes, parents calling up and demanding, well, do we get a refund? Do we get a reduction in online education is cheaper? And so I had to explain, well, yes, in fact, there are bespoke online programs that are pre-existing and set up in advance to be less expensive. But what we are doing and what we are striving to do the best we possibly can is to recreate the classroom experience in an online environment. And that was the first tension. And I'm incredibly proud of how well our students and our faculty responded to that. It was very touching to see the mutual support that arose out of it. And it was not easy, but I think that we learned a lot, and we learned fairly quickly. What's the next challenge? So then Singapore starts to relax its SMMs and other things to keep people away from school and starts allowing us to come back in small numbers. Guess what? The next tension is we don't want to come back. And so, people got accustomed to sitting at home in their pajamas and having their classes in that manner. And we had to make it, the tension was at that point, how do we persuade people, make it worthwhile for them to come back to campus? And that was really not easy. But we took a hard line, which was that if it's a small class, and we can hold it legally, according to the regulations on campus in person, that's how we're going to do it. We're not going to offer hybrid classes, so you must come. And they did. But I will concede that it was a rather grim and depressing time because what you found on campus was basically a ghost town. And so why would anyone want to come to such a thing? And then once you get to class, you have to social distance, you have to wear a mask, you can maybe do pair work if you're lucky, but you can't do the normal things that our faculty would have students do in class, presentations, projects, and so on. So that was a tension. But meanwhile, there was another tension, which is we are compelled by our home campus to as close as we possibly can, replicate the kind of delivery system that we are using at the home campus here in Singapore as well. And part of that is our home campus is not accredited as an online institution. It's accredited as in-person. So we were constantly being pressured to go back to in-person. And eventually we reached that point. But it was difficult to on the one hand, comply with the local SMMs, while at the same time trying to go back to fully face-to-face instruction, which we have now. So in short, there was a lot of different tensions along the way, and I would say that there still are some, but I think by now the students are happy to come back. And what is the difference? The difference is that it's no longer like a ghost town. So I think one thing that we have to recognize is that there's much more to undergraduate education than just sitting in a classroom and taking in content area knowledge about different things. The students come because they like to meet up with their classmates. They want to have coffee and sit in the canteen and talk about this and that and the other thing. And you can see it, you can feel it when you walk around campus. It was such a joyous thing when we started seeing the resumption of kind of student clubs and activities. It made all the difference in the world so that for young people, engaging in the social life of the campus is very, very important beyond just the academic side. So that has been a big boost, I'd say, to morale and to the willingness of students to come back, because it's no longer we have to force them to come and sit in a class and social distance. They actually want to come because it gives them the opportunity to engage in that kind of social environment.
Thank you. So it appears that there is actually two factors. Students may not necessarily know what is best for them. So having gone through 2 years of online, they would naturally, actually very much like even adults, prefer to do things with a lot of flexibility because they enjoyed that. But when there are some external forces in place, we had to force them to come. I mean, they would grumble in the beginning, but they see the value of that social interaction over time. So I'm just wondering, Belinda, do you have any comments about, while we want to focus on intrinsic motivation, what is the role of enforcing certain guidelines or even rules so that people will reach a stage where there's equilibrium until they are ready to be disciplined enough to learn on their own?
I think that's a really challenging question for me because I'm not one to be controlled. And I'm not one to be micromanaged. And so I'm not good in those environments. And I think my entire life I've been quite the rebel in lots of ways, you know. And I do very strongly believe in self-efficacy and that it's really important that we treat adults as adults. And in fact, at the break, I was talking to someone about andragogy, which is the theory of adult learning and, you know, the responsibilities that you give to, or the responsibilities adults have to themselves and the way they act and behave. That I think that when we get in these environments in universities, when we're dealing with young adults, and you'd be able to speak more eloquently to this than me because I'm not a psychologist, I don't come from that background, but from an educational pedagogy and psychology background, self-efficacy is an important part of the dimension. And so I would say that the responsibility for whether or not a student should come to campus or not shouldn't be that we put those parameters on and say you will come, but rather I'd go back to what I said in my talk around what's the reason that they need to come here. And if they're intrinsically motivated to that, then they will be committed to it, dedicated to it, and they will see a responsibility and accountability in themselves to be in attendance, to be at something. So I think the question is less about, let me give you a rule that you will obey, but rather I think there's something in the answer that is about, why are they coming? What are you offering that means that they should be here, and what value do they see in it? And that if we can get that sorted, that's the challenge for me, really. Then you don't have to be draconian. Then you don't have to say things like, well, we're not going to record it, therefore you have to turn up. Well, that's not actually teaching people self-controls or self-efficacy. It's not allowing people to make their own decisions about what they will and what they won't do and what they will get out of their life. So I think it's challenging though, and I can understand why you did what you did. Yeah, because it does make a difference then, doesn't it, in terms of, you know, getting students back into patterns. But I find for me, that's really perplexing and it's difficult. And I'd love to hear your point of view on this, you know, around, yeah.
So as an empiricist, first, 18, 19, 20 to whatever age, let's say 26, the generation that we have now, they don't have the frontal lobe development for executive function control. So I don't necessarily agree in mandating that you must do this, but in Singapore society, I think Singaporeans understand when there's a mandate, either you obey it or there's a price to be paid. Second thing is, on the generational effects, the generation that we're seeing now coming through our hallways are very, very different. We're seeing the front end of the Gen Zs, and after that, we're going to see the alphas. The Gen Zs are very different than the tail end of the millennials, as different for the front end of the millennials. And for all of us here, I think we're all in the relatively similar generation. They're very different than how we were when we were young. So one of the challenges is, and Belinda hits it right on the head there, what's the reason that they come here to learn? The socialization part of it, that's clear. They want to see their friends, they want to go shopping, they want to do all that thing that young people like to do. But the learning part of that, how do we get them to come into the classroom engaged? And I did a lot of hours of classroom observations for our programs, and it seemed to me that the students were not significantly engaged. That means we go back to another point that Belinda made, is about session plans or lesson plans. And you made the point a moment ago. Every few minutes, get them to engage in an activity. Activity theory has been worked out since the 1930s. If it's a 2-hour lecture, they're going to either leave or turn off within 15 minutes. And we do 3-hour lectures, do we not? Look at those heads nodding. Right? 3-hour lectures. That's got to be mind-numbingly difficult for an 18 or 20-year-old young person to deal with. We have to change the way we engage our students in the classroom and in the socio-technical systems that we call our LMSs. I'd like to get our colleagues' views on these kinds of things because they know what's happening in the classroom.
Yes, later we will have a part for Q&A. So any comments from the other members of the panel about what was shared earlier on about mandating certain rules, and how do you feel about giving them options? Anything else to add on that?
I feel that the assumption that student knows what is best for them and they are able to pick the best route is probably not realistic. I think as an institution, we need to be a bit of patternistic. We have to craft the rules that we know will work for majority. And give them choices, basically encourage them to delay. So I think I want it to be more clear in direction and only give the choices when they are mature enough. I'm sorry to to offer these suggestions even at higher education, but SIM is unique. That's
Mature enough is actually around 42.
I think it's different for women and men, is my understanding.
Absolutely.
And so
women mature
isn't it
much
the case?
faster.
You don't talk to a young man until he's turned 25.
Unless you're his mom, right?
Can I just build on that as well? I found that when teaching, at least, what has been most useful in terms of getting at least my students motivated is presenting to them the requirements of the job they're aiming for, right? A lot of students, first, they don't know what kind of job there are in the field, and secondly, how do I get there, right? So if I tell them at the beginning, okay, this is the job that this module helps you get, right? And these are the requirements you need to do to fulfill the job. Because of, I think maybe the Singaporean mentality, they are very career focused in some sense. Like, your parents are nagging you to get the job, right? So, okay, what does the job require? And what do you need to know in order to get the job? And then how does this module help you get that job, right? Presenting to them in their first lesson really helps them think through, and then reinforcing that throughout the course as well. Like, okay, I'm going to teach you this skill now. This skill is going to be used in this and this and this task in your job. Helps them really connect to why they need to do this course.
I really agree with that. And I go back to that example I talked about with the engineers. We have this problem at RMIT where a lot of the students in the first year were failing the mathematics courses because for whatever reason at the high school they weren't, they didn't have the right, capability or whatever it was. But we also discovered that one of the reasons why a lot of the students were failing those maths courses or dropping out was because it was so uninteresting, it's so unengaging, and that they'd come to university really excited about, I want to be an engineer. They didn't know quite what type of engineer yet, but their first class was like a maths class. And so we flipped the curriculum and we said, right, well, the first class that the would-be future engineers of RMIT students would be, and we flipped that class to be something where we demonstrated to students what engineers do and what they need to know. And that just changed it completely. We had less dropouts, we had less failures. It was amazing, actually. We did the same in our education programs. So instead of doing like the first education program was an introduction to the theory of, children's development, we flipped it into being, what does it mean to be a teacher? What do you need to learn and what do you need to know? And we just sort of built on the reason why the learners were there, what they thought they were there for, rather than what we think they should have started with. So there was something to think about, I think.
Yep. Thank you for the comments. So I think that even though the constraints right now is many of you are teaching a curriculum that is predetermined by our partner institutions, and the timetable is fixed at 3 hours because we are just being very efficient about how we are providing our education to students. But within that 3 hours, and you have a lot of flexibility how that can be managed by providing students the reasons or switching around the sequence of your content, by linking it to their personal interests or career aspiration. So actually, if you look at the chat here, a lot of our fellow associate lecturers are already providing strategies on engaging students. So be sure for our in-person attendees, you can actually look through to have the answers. So I just want to also address the fact that it seems like there's a lot of diversity, right? I think within the Singapore culture, maybe we appreciate that paternalistic kind of approach, but even within that, there are many learners who prefer more autonomy and to have agency. So because of that variation and personal differences, perhaps giving options to students and choices is always good, and not making that assumptions that what would be the best for the majority. Even within the rule, I think we can still have options. Yeah. So I just want to bring our attention back to one or two questions online here. I just want to address the people's question. And later on, we also spend some time for our participants here. You can feel free to ask your question. Okay, so we have a question from Natalie Go. Incorporating student-led learning storytelling approach during online teaching can help with engagement, but after a while, students get distracted. Is there a way to personalize learning? I think she's also asking beyond this storytelling approach, any other ideas to personalize learning? Anyone wants to?
Again, as an empiricist, I think these things can be measured. So if we talk about intelligence and analytics functions for our students coming into our programs, we can run psychometrics on them, on personality inventories, cultural value scales, intercultural communication competencies, workplace emotional intelligence, an entire battery, and report back to the student how they're individuating, excuse me, in relation to their cohort or to larger data samples if we have those. The personalization piece means that we need technologies to assist or augment that personalization piece. The course coordinator or the associate lecturer in the classroom doesn't have the capacity to personalize learning for every individual. We need a socio-technical system in the background that provides scaffolding to students, analytics for students, reporting back to students. Even the way we put students into teams or groups needs to be optimized. So for you, the magic is what you bring to the classroom and how you connect with students, and I observed it myself with our associate lecturers. I also noticed that the students oftentimes sit at the back 5 rows of the classroom and don't answer a single question. That's a value bias that we need to shift, because this generation, in order to become a professional or in the narrative of a given discipline, you have to be able to speak, write, communicate, and become an accountant or an engineer or whatever narrative we're talking about there. That's a significant challenge. Other universities have cracked this a little bit, but it's complicated and expensive. And we don't have the systems in place at RMIT quite yet to be able to assist you in that intelligence and analytics function that we ought to have in place. But I'd like to get your views on that as well. Thank you.
Any thoughts from the others? Yeah, actually the example you gave about students sitting behind at the back row in an in-person classroom is actually very similar to students online who refuse to turn on the camera or doing multitasking. So be it online or in person, there will always be students who feel that, or maybe they're confident about the way that they can learn by not giving the full attention. So I am just wondering, our associate lecturers will be facing these challenges every day, and I'm glad that RMIT and I'm sure other programs are also moving towards providing more assistance in terms of the design of the curriculum. What can associate lecturers do when they are confronted with these while waiting for that solution to come by?
So if I may take a moment, it's not students, it's people, because this group today also sat towards the back end. And I believe, I haven't seen it myself, but I've been told when you come for professional development activities, you also load the back end of maybe the Wi-Fi's better, or the lighting's better, or I can get out the door faster, or whatever escape technique we're going to use. But we put the chains up over here. Maybe we need to set up a system in our classroom where we need to load the classroom at the front and have a conversation. So I'm going to be teaching next semester, and I will just go up the stairs. And if they want to run away from me, I'll chase after them and engage with them in the ways that they want to be engaged or not.
Can I also say too that when I was talking to you, there were some of you that I picked on because I felt comfortable that some of you would be okay that I could. You know, like the man with the hat. He was clearly an extrovert. He was not going to be fazed by it. But you'll notice in the second and third times I did it, and I was seeking volunteers. Nobody really wanted to volunteer. And once I'd revealed to you that if you smiled at me, I would pick on you, you stopped smiling. And so you could actually analyse what happened through that session with me. So when I first did the first activity, I gave you no choice, but you would have to respond in some way. And you sorted it out amongst yourselves. You tossed the microphone to someone else. And the poor person on the end got to have it. And, you know, I think this man with the stripy shirt and the glasses, you said, oh, she wanted to speak. I don't think she did, actually. You just now he's going to argue with me. I'm just picking on you. So we've got World War III happening up there now. But you can see like what happens in a lecture space, and the reason why people sit at the back is they don't want to be picked on. It's like when you go to a show. I never buy the front row seats because I don't want to be the one that's picked on, you know. So I think there are techniques you can use in a classroom, but you need to read the room. So the second and third time I didn't pick on people because you felt uncomfortable with that. And I ran out of really strong extroverts to pick on. And I couldn't keep picking on Hat Man all the time. It wasn't fair. Yeah. But you can see how, like, as an educator, you have to read the space and to understand what you can and what you can't do with learners. But one of my favourite things to do is always, whenever I've lectured, and I've spent many years teaching, was to try as best as I could to block the room off so that you force people to sit in a certain space. And so that's always helpful. And like, having the ropes was good, but perhaps like when you do your classroom, you would have had the ropes cutting across as well, so that people were forced to come and sit here. Yeah, and so you don't give people a choice. So there are things about managing the physical space which are really incredibly important. But hey, look, I'm thinking about our online people. We haven't said hello to them for a while. Do we still have any? Do they have any questions for us?
Yes, the question that I posed earlier is actually from someone online.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, so I just want to address the part about reading the room and the space. You know, I think what Belinda has role model here is actually interacting with the room, and she, even in the short while, she was able to understand what are the preferences of the audience here. I think likewise in our teaching with the students, because someone online here also raised about certain expectation, you know, like maybe the head of programs are expecting a student-led discussion, a lot of activities. So many of you are very eager and enthusiastic to invite students to participate, but they shy away. And because of that, they are unhappy with the way you teach and they give you a low rating. So that was what that came up here. So some of you are doing class observations and making decisions about our associate lecturers' performance. So what, how does that work out in terms of, what can the associate lecturers do? On one end, they want to encourage more student interaction, but students hate it.
Well, I would say in the University of Buffalo program, we have a system where we incentivize for students to participate, giving them some sort of reward. So typically, in most of the modules, about 10% is given over to attendance and participation. And how the person teaching the course is going to assign that is really up to them. Sometimes they have a very detailed rubric. Sometimes it's more of a holistic way of gauging it. And it doesn't always work. There may be some students who say, I don't care about those 10 points. I'm just going to sit here and not say a word. But for most of them, I think that they're pretty kiasu most of the time, and they want to get every blessed point that they can. So that helps. But nothing is guaranteed. So I think it's always a challenge, I suppose, to try to engage the students and cause them to want to actively participate. But I'd say that within this cultural context, that incentivization is helpful.
We don't have luxuries of awarding participation marks, but I do observe the great lecturers, teachers are able to encourage participation by making complicated abstract things interesting and simple. So when students are able to, they feel, they're able to appreciate the difficult concepts through the storytelling, even teaching mathematics. We can actually use stories or make the equations kind of, let students able to see the interactions among all the variables, and make things very simple to learn, and kind of make it concrete. So students enjoy this kind of teaching. They are able to mentally participate in the activities, the materials. So those are the lectures that are rewarded, highly rewarded, I think, by the students, because students, when they realize and they have grasped the things, and they are able to understand, they kind of experience a leap forward of their understanding, intelligence probably. So I think I have observed many of the lecturers who are able to do that, and I think that is an art. And it obviously, it takes years of experience before the lecturers are able to master the gist of doing things that way. We need to be patient. It takes patience to develop.
Yeah. So in my observations, which is a constrained sample set, it wasn't the students weren't willing to ask questions. It was they weren't willing to ask questions in the open class setting. So my observation was they would not ask any question during the class, but as soon as the break happened, there's 20 students lined up to ask the lecturer questions. That value biasing needs to be reset. And it may be, I don't want to go too far into cultural dimensions here, but it may be some form of kiasuism where I want to ask a question that I only know the answer to, so I get a relative competitive advantage to other students. That's a challenging thing to overcome, and I want to work with our RMIT associate lecturers on how we can reset that.
Well, okay, building on that as well, I don't really interpret it as a kiasuism, but a fear of losing face, right? A fear of appearing somehow dumber than your classmates, or like no one's gonna ask this stupid question except for me, right? And that happens. I mean, that's something we all struggle with. Something that we can see in our students as well. One of the classrooms which I observed very nicely was actually a fairly small classroom. It was a hybrid classroom. I think there were like 5 students online, 5 students in class and 10 students online, right? So it was really more of a online class than a physical class. But what the lecturer did was that she was constantly going back and forth between the hybrid students and the physical students and encouraging them to speak to one another, right? So she would actually, whenever the online students posted a message in the chat and answer to a question that she asked, for example, she would encourage them to, okay, can I please ask you to turn on your microphone, and then maybe turn on your camera, and then tell the students in the physical class how you got this answer, right? Or what's your opinion on this particular topic, right? And that's one way she encouraged them to interact with one another online and offline, which I think created a much better environment for the students. Obviously, we can't do this all the time because some students are a bit more shy. The other thing I've seen, which is constrained sometimes by technology, is having online breakout rooms, using the online lecture system. But that is constrained by technology. Sometimes they work well, sometimes they don't, right? And sometimes I've seen one class where the teacher broke them up into students. They were all supposedly online. No one was talking in the group because they were all AFK. They were all away from keyboard, right? So that sometimes happens. But I have conducted a class like that. It does work, and you get the groups who were productive to share their experiences or their answers in the class. It's a lot more preparation work needed, but I think it has benefits, educational benefits for the students as well to do it that way. And sometimes you just have to accept that students will be distracted and you can't control them fully, but you do the best you can with what resources they are willing to, what attention they're willing to give you and what resources you have available. Right.
May I, Mei Ling? I just want to go on the
Just
record
30
and say
seconds.
I was not reifying Kiyasuism in any way. I was just using it as an example of a possible exploratory power for what's going on in the classroom. The question I tell students or ask students is, what's the latency period between in your professional world when you're in work, what's the latency between your director asking you a question and you beginning to answer that question? And they think for a second, and they think, oh, a couple minutes. No, it's about 3 seconds, right? But in the classroom, we can ask students questions and they never answer. So we need to reset that. And I see you nodding, so you understand, at least from my observations, what's occurring. It's something that needs to be potentially reset.
Yep. So I also want to assure all our associate lecturers that although there is a system in place for the end of course rating, but I think that open communication between yourself and anyone in SIM, your head of programs and all the directors are actually very important, because if we know how the classroom works, and then for my department, for example, academic development, we are looking at your professional learning. So what can we do experimentally? And I also want to provide some information about what I've observed in the classroom, and I myself also do, because students naturally don't like to be put on the spot. Yeah, so when they are being put on the spot too often and have the perception they are forced to do so, they will dislike that experience. But what I've observed from some other classroom that is successful would be prepare the students from the first and second lesson. Maybe let them do polling first, or just write on a piece of paper before they are being called, to answer or to being questioned. So like what Belinda mentioned, when she put people in the spot, I think here we are all okay, because we are not like students, right? So as adults, but for students, they may feel a lot of losing of the face. But so if, let's say, there are some other avenue to help them build that habit of confidence to speak in the classroom, then you can expect fewer unhappiness or complaints, okay? We actually have overrun the time, but I want to spend the next couple of minutes to invite questions from the floor. Yes, I see Sam having a question, raised his hand. Can we have a mic passed to him? So maybe we'll answer about 3 questions, and we'll try to keep it short. So I see people choke already, Sam and Andrew. So the third person, you can quickly choke your spot first.
Hi, I think we discussed about social constructivism, very good. But I think what is lacking at SIM is part of the pedagogy of collaborative learning and self-learning. I tried that, and I'm in the process of writing a prototype of collaborative learning, self-learning, and hybrid is the perfect tool to use. And there are many tools out there, but we have to, curate the tools according to the students, how we feel them also. So I think we really should ask the associates to produce prototypes or engage them to come up, because with their years of experience, they should be able to give us some attributes or all these. They may not know it very well, until I didn't know very well until I go for the courses and I realized, oh, this is collaborative learning, or this is self-learning, this is cognitive constructivism. So I think perhaps we should really focus on the pedagogy. So I'd like to hear more from maybe Belinda. What are, based on what you have experienced, the tools and the methods for collaborative learning in a hybrid manner?
Thank you for that question. And he warned me before he was going to ask me a question, but he wouldn't tell me what it was. He's trying to trick me. Now, I wanted to go back, before I sort of maybe answer that, I'd like to go back to something you said before about what makes students happy and what doesn't. There was a piece of research that I did at the Open University in the UK, which looked at the different types of curriculum experiences that learners had and what made them happy and what didn't, and what actually improved their learning outcomes or what their learning gain was. And what we discovered was when students are most unhappy with their teachers, they learn more. And I think it's really interesting that, like, we talk a lot about social constructivism, connectivism and collaborative learning and all these sort of approaches to learning which force our students to be interactive and make them work, actually. You have to work harder when you're in a group or when you're trying to construct knowledge with another person, when it would be much easier just to come in like you have today and sit in the lecture theatre and just hear it. Take the odd notes, look at the recording later. That's easy. There's not much effort required in that in terms of your learning. So I think it's an interesting challenge for associate lecturers that if you start to turn your classrooms into collaborative spaces, hybrid spaces, and spaces where students are expected to work together to construct knowledge, it's likely that they're going to be more unhappy to start off with. So how do you combat that? I think it's really important from day one that you lay down the expectations, and then from the very first moment they sit in your classroom with you, that the expectations are made clear that this is about you being part of the learning, that you're part of the story of how you become what you are next. So if you do that from day one, it's going to be easier than if on day one you give them a lecture, because that's what they're expecting, because that's what they think higher education is. They don't expect it to be something that's interactive. So on that collaboration piece and the collaborative learning, that's what you have to get over in a sense. You have to start from day one to do that kind of work. And I've always liked, and I think hybrid learning is probably not dissimilar in lots of ways to the flipped classroom. Do you remember that? That was a bit of a trend and still is a bit. But the flipped classroom required a student to come to class prepared. And actually, if you look back at the Oxfordian and those sorts of models of learning, then you come to your tutorial having done a lot of reading and a lot of writing already. You don't come into the classroom expecting someone to give you all the knowledge. So there could be something to think about in the way you design your learning experiences about what do you expect the students to have done before, so when they come in the classroom they can actually construct new knowledge, collaborate with others. Because coming into the classroom and just sort of telling people things is making the assumption that they've brought nothing into the room to start off with as well. So there's probably a lot of complex things and big topics that I've touched on there, but I'll hand it over to someone else. I hope that goes in part to give you some ideas about where my thinking is. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Belinda. So I see, Andrew, you have a question as well.
Is it okay if I don't use the mic?
Yes, we can hear you.
What about the people online, though? They may not be able to hear you.
Oh, yeah. Please use the mic because the people online may not be able to hear you.
Okay, first, oh, wow. Sorry, normally I lecture without the mic in the lecture hall, so sorry about that. Thanks, Professor Melinda. I think we, honestly, including myself, learned a lot from you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, actually, it's not a question, though. I'm just sitting there as a working professional that I've taught for 15 years. And by the way, Professor Mark, I'm teaching for RMIT as well. Yeah, for applied brand management as well as marketing principle. So I think, there's this topic about how to get the student coming to class and get engaged. I think perhaps it may not be just simply about pedagogy and so on. I wrote something here. I'm not too sure whether it's too small to see. I call it the EF3. So the EF3 stands for faculty, in which everyone have talked about trying to get our lessons engaging. to get students to have fun, to be honest. Because I think for 3 hours lessons, to be very honest, it's very difficult to get the students to be sitting there, including myself, to start talking for 3 hours. So I think we need to engage fun into it, and there's many forms of fun that we can do. Then number two, I believe we need to create an environment, be it the classroom or be it, in fact, the whole of this SIM. I love SIM, to be honest. When I come in here, there's life now, but I think maybe we can make it more hype. We could do, what leading universities have been doing, creating, this different universities, day. You could have some fun where people come together as a community, RMIT community, UOL community, and so on. So that there is, things that students feel like they're coming to a second home. So that is my second, the E. And the third, the third is a fun that we need to inject. I think the fun comes in many forms. Students, perhaps, shouldn't be always been taught in a lecture hall, because to be honest, if we want to learn something like design thinking, it can never be done in a lecture hall, for example, or even a physical classroom. It had to be like a more conducive learning environment in which we segregated into different spaces. And finally, I think it's a friend. To be honest, when I teach the RMIT students, most of students attend the classes because they love to be with their friends here. And I think this is what I call the EF3, because it's no one method that will make the student want to come to class. You have to have the element of the faculty to show care and concern, to have fun. You need to make known to them that SIM is a family, that they can come in as a second home, and they have friends around to collaborate and to learn together. And likewise, I think fun is a very big element in which, unfortunately, in pedagogy, we did not really focus very much onto it. Pardon me if I'm being rude on that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Great comments there. Yeah, yes.
Should we respond?
Yeah. Do the panel members have any response to this?
Yeah, of course. So I like your ideas a lot. I'm in a completely different paradigm from constructivist approaches. So I come at this from the view of how do we train pilots? So when I went through rotary and fixed wing pilot training, or how do we train analysts? So as an analyst working in the field for a number of years. But you bring about fun. Okay, I'll change that word to play. And then we tap into the most basic instinct of human beings, and that's the survival instinct. So we see this through gamification and simulation, competitiveness and survival. And the games that are out there in the gaming world all tap into that instinct. How do I survive? How do I get to the next level? How do I compete with my peers? Radical embodied educational ecologies incorporate exactly what you just said. But it's very difficult to do in the structures and the constraints that we have in our systems right now. A 3-hour lecture has predetermined content and outcomes that are supposed to be delivered, and you can't really deviate from that because the structure of the curriculum. So it's going to require a radical rethinking of how we engage students in the classroom, to engage them in the way that they think the world operates and prepare them for their future world, their professional world.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So I think many of you have very good ideas. Despite some of the constraints and challenges that we mentioned, please don't give up. I think we want that conversation to go on while things may not happen in the speed that you expect or hope for, but it is beginning to change. And by having more conversation and even that perseverance, we will be moving in the right direction. So I just want to end this panel by just inviting all our panel members to maybe just give one sentence of a key takeaway, perhaps, that you want our associate lecturers to bring back. Not a very long sentence, please. Yeah.
I think fun is so important, but that's not my sentence. My sentence is you, me, and us.
Well, hold on, thinking on the spot. I think it's going to sound a bit cliche, but honestly, sometimes what students want isn't always what's best for them. And as educators, we need to balance the two. Yeah.
I think the principles we have to work on is to connect, to inspire students and have students inspire each other and us, and to become teachers or educators and students becoming professionals.
I just wanted to emphasize that SIM still offer probably the best campus environments among all the PEIs. Please make full use of them for students. Let them to form a family, societies here, and make them see this as a second home. Many of the students, they will not come to SIM because of they have joined some societies. Encourage them to do that, and technology is getting more stable. Always remember that SIM students are unique, so we need to have our own way and improve upon.
I'd say for me, the single thing that comes to mind about what we've talked about today and what we've experienced over the past couple of words is the word credibility when we apply it to online learning. I know that before the pandemic, there was this sort of negative connotation. If you said online learning, people might doubt the quality and this and that. But we've come a very, very long way, and I'm very, very happy to say that our faculty members have gained credibility in the sense that they now have confidence that they can do things that they couldn't do before. Our students have gained skills that will allow them to collaborate in a post-pandemic world that otherwise they might not have gotten. So I think that there's a lot for us collectively to reflect on now and to be very proud of for what we have accomplished over the past couple of years.
All right, so thank you everyone in the panel. So can we give every one of them a round of applause? Okay, so yes, we have come to the end of the conference.
Yes, actually, thank you all very much for your insights. If you would remain seated one moment more, then we can take a group picture of you. All right, thank you very much. All right.
Can we give our panelists another round of applause?
Yes. Thank you. Can we get the next slide, please? Yes, thank you. And with that, we conclude our program for today. If you would please scan this QR code, the next one. This is for the evaluation form. We ask that you fill it out after you have also watched Professor Jilly Salmon's session, which is online from 1 p.m. onwards, just because there's also a couple questions on her presentation as well. So.
Yep, so for everyone online, thank you very much for attending today's event. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. For all the SIM staff joining online, your digital Grab voucher is on its way. Please order yourself a nice lunch and continue your networking on the virtual platform.
All right. And one last thing for all our lecturers here today and also for everyone online, we have put in your goodie bags a overview of the trainings that we're organizing for Q1 and Q2. If you would please tick the boxes of the trainings that you find interesting, and you can leave it at the registration table. If you want to think about it and hand it in later, that's also fine. And for everyone online, the form is also on the platform. It's in the pre-event buzz under upcoming events. So you can find the form there, you can download it, please fill it out, and you can send it by email or drop it by later in the office.
All right, thank you very much once again for coming. And please remember to drop the event registration form at the counter outside and enjoy the buffet lunch, which is provided for you outside. Thank you very much and have a great weekend.
Thank you all.